If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 151, Courage. This is Charlie's agency. A place that accepts all commissions. If you want to know something, you can issue a commission. Coulson, you must know that every piece of intelligence is valuable. Charles wanted to try whether the mission level would change when the commission task involved the extraordinary beings or ninjas. He also wanted to know if the other party would dare to trade some of the things that he cared about. Coulson heard Charles Doyle's words and was obviously stunned. What did this mean? Intelligence task commission? Even Natasha, who had been silent beside him, looked at Charles with curiosity, carefully examining him. Coulson coughed and then organized his thoughts before speaking. Are you saying that we can also issue commissions here, no matter what kind of mission, including consulting on some issues? Charles didn't hesitate for a moment but instead straightforwardly said, yes, you can also issue commission tasks. Upon hearing Charles's words, Coulson immediately became alert and said, okay, in that case, I would like to submit an intelligence commission. Will you take it? A smile appeared on Charles's face at this moment, and he said, yes, but I have to remind you that the commission fee might be very high, and it may vary depending on the nature of the matter. Upon hearing Charles say that the fee would be very high, Coulson didn't mind. Was money scarce in their agency? Well, it was, but they lacked big money, billions or tens of billions. They didn't lack the money for the commissions at Charles's agency. Then let's submit the first commission task and see if you are really willing to take it. Coulson took out a photo from his hand. It was a photo of the ninja dog Parker, and then he said, I need to know all the information about this pet dog and why it appeared next to Tony Stark. Looking at the photo Coulson took out and his words, Charles thought to himself, sure enough, they're really concerned about Tony. But it's just that their director's character is not very good. Okay, let's sign the task commission. Then Charles called Irika and asked him to bring a blank task scroll. Not long after, Irika came with a blank task scroll and placed it in front of Charles before leaving directly. After obtaining the task scroll, Charles didn't immediately start writing the content of the commission but looked at Coulson and said, I can take this commission task, and I can even tell you the detailed information. But before that, I need to talk about the commission fee. Coulson, who didn't care at this moment, said, money is not a problem. Charles smiled and then said, your mission involves the extraordinary beings, so the price is not money. For the commission fee, I need you to provide 3 energy blocks. Among them, the identity of the pet dog in the photo is 1 energy block. The reason for appearing next to Tony Stark, 2 energy blocks. Energy blocks, what are you talking about? Coulson said curiously, but he was shocked to the core. Could it be that Charles Doyle knew about the Tesseract, and even knew that the agency secretly produced energy blocks using the Tesseract? Charles looked at the puzzled Coulson and smiled, it's the thing you're thinking of. Your question involves the extraordinary beings, and the commission fee requires to be the energy blocks. Mr. Charles, I don't understand what you're talking about. Could you be more specific? Seeing Coulson still playing dumb, Charles directly pointed out, energy blocks produced through the Tesseract. Do I need to be more explicit? This time Coulson could no longer pretend. He knew that Charles Doyle and the organization behind him might really know about this thing. Sorry, I can't make a decision on this matter. I need to contact my superior. Charles shrugged and then gestured, go ahead. Coulson didn't hesitate and left directly. He was going to consult Nick Fury. Meanwhile, Natasha, who remained, gazed at Charles Doyle with her big eyes, showing no intention of averting her gaze. Seeing her propping her chin with her arm and staring at him, Charles waved in front of her and said, Miss, although I know I'm very charming, is it appropriate for you as an agent to stare at me like this? Natasha smiled and then sat up straight, saying, I'm just curious how a killer like you managed to rise from the bottom to such a high position today and how you gained the support of the Hidden Leaf Village after reaching adulthood. Are you a child who ran out of their village and was discovered by the other party in adulthood? Listening to Natasha's speculation, Charles thought for a moment and felt that her guess was somewhat interesting. At first glance, it made some sense, but unfortunately, she guessed wrong. Charles leaned back on the sofa and smiled, Are you planning to tell me a story, Miss Agent? Natasha smiled and said, If you don't mind, we can chat. Charles shrugged and did not refuse. On the other side, as Coulson had just walked out of Charles's agency, Barton, who was hiding in the dark, saw him. Seeing that only Carlson came out, he immediately called through the earpiece, "Carlson, Carlson, is there any trouble?" Listening to the voice of the small earpiece in his ear, Carlson replied, "No trouble, just something I need to contact the director about." As he got into his car and closed the door, Carlson immediately picked up the satellite phone and dialed Nick Fury. After the call was connected, Carlson recounted the latest intelligence and the changes and requests from Charles's side to his superior. On the other end of the phone, Nick Fury listened silently to his subordinate's report and then said, "Carlson, you can agree to it, but we need more valuable intelligence. I'll send someone to bring you the energy blocks later, but you need to negotiate with them. We need more information, especially about the forces behind them. As long as they dare to sell, we dare to buy." Upon hearing that his director had readily agreed, Carlson was somewhat surprised, thinking to himself that indeed, the director was the director. He was just a small soldier, and their courage was indeed different. Chapter 152, Energy Blocks. At this moment, Nick Fury, who was at the headquarters, hung up the phone and began to speculate in his mind. Could it be that the purpose of this emergence from the Hidden Leaf Village is related to the Tesseract? Or perhaps they have a more efficient way of harnessing this object. Since you want these energy blocks, what will you offer in exchange? I want to see how you plan to use these things. Nick Fury was confident enough to directly trade energy blocks for intelligence. The small quantity of these things was at most used for the energy magazines and laser guns. And the source was under his control. If they wanted more, they would have to play by his rules. For the Tesseract, it seemed like it could produce as much energy as one wanted. From their observation, the energy of this object seemed endless and inexhaustible. Since he could fish out more useful things through the energy blocks, it's worth it. Most importantly, Nick Fury had a bottom line. No matter what happened, as long as he called his good friend, Captain Marvel, he believed she could solve the problem. The Hidden Leaf Village wouldn't be able to turn the tables. After gaining Nick Fury's support, Carlson re-entered Charles' agency and returned to his previous position. At this point, Natasha had already stopped communicating with Charles and had secretly left a phone number for him. "Mr. Charles, our director has agreed to your request to use energy blocks as the commission fee. But is this price too high? I think a single energy block would be more appropriate." Charles directly refused. Charles' agency is fair in its pricing and does not negotiate. If you are not satisfied with the price, you can go to another agency for a paid investigation. Carlson thought to himself, apart from your Charles agency, where else can one find information? Do you realize you're monopolizing the market? Okay, Mr. Charles, then we will follow your commission fee, Carlson said, conceding. Seeing that the other party agreed, Charles didn't hesitate. He quickly wrote the content of the commission on the scroll and handed it to Carlson for signature and confirmation. Taking the commission scroll in hand, Carlson didn't sign immediately. Instead, he touched the texture of the scroll with his hand, carefully examining the patterns on the scroll and even flipping it over to check. After confirming that the miniature camera concealed in his chest suit button had captured all the footage, Carlson finally signed his name on the commission scroll. "Mr. Charles, the director has already sent someone to deliver the commission fee. It will arrive shortly. Can you complete the commission first?" Taking the commission scroll back and securing it, Charles said, "I am a person of principle. I will not undertake the task until I have received the commission fee." At this point, Charles held the initiative, and Carlson did not insist, sitting on the sofa waiting. During the wait, Carlson was not idle. He began to discuss the agency's fee standards with Charles, what kind of commission would be paid for with what. Charles was equally straightforward, outlining the fees involved in extraordinary affairs. In the tasks involving of extraordinary individuals, all commissions required energy blocks as payment. Only the most mundane tasks would be charged in regular currency. But even in the case of monetary payment, the price was extremely high. Even if the other party was wealthy, they wouldn't consider entrusting the routine tasks to Charles' agency that ordinary agents could easily handle. Without making Charles wait long, Carlson's phone rang soon after, and he walked out of the office, then returned with a box in his hand. Carlson carried a briefcase, not very large but seemingly heavy. After performing 3 verifications such as fingerprint recognition, facial recognition, and iris recognition, Carlson opened the box. He then took out 3 cubic energy crystals from it and placed them in front of Charles. "This is your commission fee for the task. Can we proceed with the task now?" Upon receiving the commission fee, Charles immediately submitted the task to system in his mind. Task assessment in progress. Ding! Task assessment successful. B-level task. Completing the task will reward 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and an ordinary treasure chest. Receiving the system prompt, Charles didn't hesitate. He stacked the 3 energy blocks together in front of him and began to explain, "The pet dog in your photo is a ninja dog. Its name is Parker, raised by ninjas from a young age, possessing extraordinary powers as a ninja dog. You can consider this ninja dog as a superhuman creature, having immense strength and obeying its master's commands. As for why it appeared by Tony Stark's side, it's very simple. This ninja dog named Parker was hired by Tony Stark as a bodyguard in the form of a commissioned task for a month." Upon hearing Charles's explanation, Coulson finally understood what was going on. It turned out that this dog was currently Tony's bodyguard. Superhuman creatures? It seemed that the Hidden Leaf Village not only had a system for cultivating superhumans but also had the ability to train superhuman creatures. "Mr. Charles, how strong is this Parker, the so-called ninja dog?" Coulson asked. After pondering for a moment, Charles answered, "Defeating your special operations team outside should be a piece of cake." Coulson laughed awkwardly. Hearing Charles say that defeating his deployed special operations team would be a piece of cake, he was shocked. On one hand, he was shocked that the other party knew about his deployment, and on the other hand, he was amazed that such a small ninja dog could take down their entire special operations team. After all, it was a fully armed special forces team, which apparently couldn't match the ninja dog. "Could it be that you're lying to me?" But then Coulson thought that even the proud Tony Stark would specifically commission a mission, so he must have recognized the strength of this ninja dog. "Now that the first task is completed, can we proceed with the second task, Mr. Charles?" Coulson asked. Clearly, the purchase of the first piece of information had left Coulson quite satisfied. On one hand, it dispelled his concerns and provided information about the ninja dog's general information and abilities. On the other hand, it revealed the reason for its appearance by Tony's side, not that Tony was being controlled or that he had joined another organization, which relieved him somewhat. Upon hearing that the other party wanted to proceed with the second task, Charles knocked on the table, then looked at the briefcase and began to ponder. It was evident that he couldn't let the other party continue asking questions endlessly, but he also wanted to know how many energy blocks were in that box. However, Charles didn't see any need to directly resort to snatching. Chapter 153, Value. If it was just about snatching a box of energy blocks, Charles felt it would be very tasteless and not in line with his identity. If he were to snatch something, it would be better to aim for something big. He should find an opportunity to take the Tesseract instead. It wouldn't be worth it to snatch just one box of energy blocks right now. Charles looked at Coulson in front of him and then said, "You seem to have a high thirst for knowledge with these commission tasks." At this point, Charles looked at the size of the energy blocks in front of him and silently calculated the maximum capacity of the box in Coulson's hand. "Mr. Charles, we want to know the specific meaning of this symbol. And the criteria for distinguishing between lower-level ninja, middle-level ninja, and upper-level ninja." Coulson didn't dare to ask overly sensitive questions right from the start, so he could only inquire and probe through some minor aspects. Charles had already guessed that the energy blocks brought by Coulson were no more than 15. There should be only 12 left in the box now. One question costs 3 energy blocks, 3 blocks for the symbol, 3 blocks for the lower-level ninja, 3 for the middle-level ninja, and 3 for the upper-level ninja, totaling 12 energy blocks. Upon hearing Charles's reply, Coulson immediately said, "Sir, that's 2 questions, so it should be 6, shouldn't it?" Charles shook his head and then said, "These are 4 questions. Moreover, you already seem to know about the 3 ninja ranks, so it seems that the previous spy has acquired quite a bit of information." Hearing Charles mention about the spy, Coulson didn't insist further. "Okay, we'll go with the price you said." Then Coulson directly opened the box, revealing the remaining energy blocks inside, a total of 12. Taking out all the energy blocks and placing them on the table, he signaled to Charles that he could tell them the answers now. However, Charles didn't speak directly this time. Instead, he had Irika bring 2 blank mission scrolls, and he signed the mission with Coulson. Seeing Charles's actions, Coulson commented, "Mr. Charles, can't you just take the energy blocks and tell us the answers?" Charles just smiled and said, "Coulson, this is the rule. Seeing Charles emphasizing that it was the rule, Carlson looked helpless but had to sign the mission as per Charles's request. In fact, all Charles wanted was to get a few treasure chests for free. After all, the rewards for B-level tasks were not low, a common treasure chest, 2,000 reputation and 200,000 copper coins, among which the reputation value and the treasure chest were what Charles valued the most. After signing the commission task, Charles had Irika put away the scrolls and submitted them directly in the system. After confirming the judgment, Charles once again received 2 B-level tasks. Seeing that Charles had done everything, Carlson still had a gentle smile on his face and then said, "Mr. Charles, can you tell us the answers now?" At this point, Charles reached into his pocket and purchased a lower-level forehead protector from the system store. Charles took the forehead protector out of his pocket and placed it on the table in front of him. Then he said, "The symbol on the forehead protector represents the Hidden Leaf Village. As for the significance it carries, it's necessary to start with the 2 founding families of the Leaf Village." As Charles explained, Carlson listened attentively, while Natasha carefully observed Charles's facial expressions and subtle movements during his speech to make an initial judgment about whether he was lying. Charles briefly explained that the Hidden Leaf Village was created through the cooperation of 2 major families, and the name Konoha was given by the head of one of the families. After listening to Charles's explanation, Carlson curiously asked, "What are the names of these 2 families?" Charles pointed to the energy blocks on the table and smiled, "That's a separate question that requires a new commission." Although Charles didn't mention the names of the 2 families, Carlson speculated in his mind. Was the village created due to wars during the turbulent times? It seemed like it was time to look up information on the First and Second World Wars, or even earlier wars. After completing the second commission task, Charles began to explain the details of the third commission. The Hidden Leaf Village has its own ninja school. Children of the appropriate age undergo an entrance test after reaching the enrollment age to become a ninja student. After studying at the school for 6 years, they will take the graduation exam. Students who pass the exam will become official ninjas, known as genin. At the same time, this graduate student will be awarded a ninja forehead protector. As he spoke, Charles picked up the ninja forehead protector from the table and said, "Wearing this forehead protector signifies being a ninja. It is also a symbol of a ninja. A genin, after a period of mission training and reaching a certain standard, can apply with their team leader to participate in the Chunin exam. If the performance in the Chunin exam is qualified, they will be promoted to Chunin and be awarded a standard Chunin vest. A Jounin, first become a Chunin, then apply through recommendation from other Jounin, and after passing the assessment, they will become a Jounin. Generally, a Jounin has the strength to stand alone." Upon hearing Charles's relatively general introduction, Carlson asked, "What about the standards of strength?" When Carlson asked about the standards of strength, Charles didn't hide anything and answered directly, "Note, previously it was ninja level, below are the strength divisions, Genin Chunin Special Jounin Jounin Elite Jounin Cage Super Cage 6 paths. For example, a Genin can easily solve an armed force or all the armies on a small island. And a Chunin can easily kill a team of Genin. As for a Jounin, they can easily kill multiple Chunin teams." Carlson, you have to understand that the ninja ranking isn't determined solely by how many tons of force you have in your punch or how many meters you can run in a second. This is determined by whether or not you have other qualities besides just having the strength to hold that rank. Hearing Charles's explanation, Carlson didn't inquire further. He just recorded all this information and planned to analyze it with his team later. "Carlson, your commission task is completed. If you have anything else you want to know, I hope you can bring more energy blocks to me next time. This time, I gave you a discount because of our first cooperation." Charles currently did not know how much an energy block was worth in terms of recharging. Only after confirming this, he would design a pricing standard specifically for the other party. Upon hearing Charles's words, Carlson's first reaction was that the other party wanted to raise the price, but he still extended his hand with a smile, saying, "Pleasure working with you. If there are any commission tasks in the future, we will contact you immediately. This will be all for now. After all, I only brought this much." Charles shook hands with Carlson and also smiled, "Pleasure working with you." Chapter 154, Recharge Reward. After leaving Charles's agency, Carlson immediately returned to the Triskelion with Natasha, Barton, and the personnel of the Special Task Force. Barton looked at the two and asked curiously, "How did your conversation go?" "Driving," Carlson replied, "we obtained quite a bit of information that needs to be cross-checked at the headquarters." Natasha, do you have any progress or discoveries on your end? After a moment of contemplation, Natasha spoke, based on my observations, the information he provided seems to be genuine. Moreover, if he wanted to continue obtaining energy blocks, he shouldn't have lied during the initial commission task. After all, the questions we consulted weren't particularly sensitive pieces of information. Furthermore, I will try to establish a friendly relationship with him to see if there will be some progress. Listening to their conversation, Barton placed his longbow in front of him and asked somewhat strangely, "What exactly happened inside?" "From what I hear, you seem to have cooperated, haven't you?" Barton's guess was correct. Coulson did indeed collaborate with Charles's agency, specifically for the Intelligence Commission task. As for the deceased Barbara Morse, she had become less important in the face of acquiring information. As a special agent, Coulson knew better about maximizing benefits. They needed to obtain more information from the other party, develop a comprehensive plan, evaluate gains and losses, and only then would they think about Barbara Morse. By that time, Barbara's death would only be considered a reason for starting a war, nothing more than that. Before that, Barbara's situation had to be put aside. After all, the number of undercover spies sacrificed by them every year was uncountable. Was the death of every undercover spy a reason for launching an all-out attack? Obviously, that was not possible. "Barton, what specifically happened? I will report to the director when we return to the headquarters later." "You will find out then, so we don't have to repeat ourselves." Upon hearing Coulson's words about reporting to the director later, Barton knew that things might be developing in a way he least wanted. Barton wiped his longbow expressionlessly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Understood." Natasha glanced at Barton next to her, sensing that he wasn't in high spirits, but she didn't say much. On the other side, inside Charles's agency. Upon seeing Coulson and the others leave, Charles's consciousness entered the system space. Opening the task assembly hall, he found that the 3 B-level tasks that had just been submitted were now all marked as completed. He clicked to claim the rewards. Ding! Task completed, rewards received. 2,000 reputation points, 200,000 copper coins, and a normal treasure chest. 2,000 reputation points, 200,000 copper coins, and a normal treasure chest. 2,000 reputation points, 200,000 copper coins, and a normal treasure chest. Receiving 6,000 reputation points made Charles very satisfied. He immediately exited the system space and looked at the energy blocks on the table. He wanted to try whether these things could be recharged and what the value of an energy block was. Charles casually picked up an energy block and immediately heard the system's prompt sound. Ding! New energy found. Would you like to recharge? Recharge. Ding! Recharge successful, received 180 plus 180 gold coins. Upon hearing 180 plus 180, Charles immediately entered the system space to check and found out that it was the double recharge reward of 180 gold coins. Exiting the system space once again, Charles did not hesitate and immediately recharged all the energy blocks. Ding! Recharge successful, received 2,520 gold coins. At this point, all the energy blocks on the table had disappeared, and Charles's coins had increased to 2,944, enough for a 10 consecutive recruitment. Charles didn't perform the 10 consecutive recruitment in the lobby but planned to do it in his room. Just as Charles was about to leave, Domino Irica approached respectfully and stood in front of Charles. He said, "Lord Charles, all the agents outside have retreated. None left at all." After pondering for a moment, Irica said, "According to my investigation, there were hardly any remaining, unless they used some technological means for surveillance." "All right, I understand. Tell everyone to do what they need to do. There's no need to stay here. We have temporarily reached a truce with the other party." "A temporary truce?" Irica made a note of this and said, "Understood, Lord Charles." Then Irica retreated to inform others to stand down. After instructing Irica, Charles also left the rest area and headed to his room. Meanwhile, just as Coulson returned to the Triskelion, he was about to take the elevator upstairs when he ran into Brock Rumlow coming out of the elevator. Both sides just nodded to each other and didn't engage in conversation. Apparently, Coulson had no idea that his destination at the moment was the Charles's agency he had just visited. Coulson's trio soon arrived outside Nick Fury's office by the elevator. "Knock, knock, knock. Come in." Coulson entered Nick Fury's office with Barton and Natasha. What information did you all obtain? Coulson immediately recounted all the information he had obtained, letting Barton and Nick Fury know what information the energy blocks had been exchanged for. Director, based on this intelligence and the information transmitted earlier, it can be basically concluded that the ninjas of Konoha village are different from the Japanese ninjas we knew before. Whether it's from the hand or the chest, though they are also commonly referred to as ninjas, they are not the same. But the ninjas currently appearing around Charles Doyle are mostly of Asian appearance. Based on the information disclosed by the other party, I speculate that they may have established the village during World War I or World War II. Of course, I don't rule out earlier times, but I suspect that their location is not on Japan. After all, we have thoroughly surveyed those areas, and we wouldn't be unaware of the existence of such a group. However, I still suggest checking the information from that period there to see if we can find any clues. After all, the only place known to use that title is there. Chapter 155, Action Plan, Bonus Chapter. In response to Coulson's analysis, Nick Fury nodded in agreement and said, "We'll arrange for personnel to look up this information, focusing on any ninja-related data." Since he mentioned wars and enmity between families, it's highly probable that it was before the periods of World War I or World War II. After all, during those wars, the country wasn't divided into multiple sections. Wars between families all happened during the shogunate era, with small-scale battles at best. The new lower-level ninja called Naruto Uzumaki, with his standard blonde hair, might suggest that their team consists not only of Asians but also other racial members as well. Since it is an organization with extraordinary powers, we need to broaden our perspective. Perhaps it's not just Asians, but there may be more diverse ethnic groups involved. Upon hearing the director's words, Coulson nodded. However, he didn't pay much attention. Since the other party could coexist for decades or even centuries, they must have assimilated many races long ago. Could they really expect the other party to be identified based on a few features? Nonetheless, Coulson didn't show any peculiarities and calmly said, "Director, the key point is that we haven't obtained information about the two founding families. I plan to obtain the names of those two families through an intelligence mission the next time we meet. I believe that having the names of these two families might make the investigation a little easier. All right, I will leave this matter to you. Obtain as much information as possible in a short period. If possible, find out why they need energy blocks. After all, these things can be used to create energy weapons, and their power should not be underestimated." However, Coulson was unaware that Charles and his companions were not from this world. Even if he were to tell them these names, they wouldn't find any useful information in the files. Even if there were similar names, it would be dubious and of no reference value. "Coulson, what do you think of their ninja classification and strength?" Coulson didn't respond directly. After pondering for a moment, he took out a picture of Rock Lee and said, "We already have basic information about this ninja. We've also conducted an analysis of Rock Lee's strength and abilities. His strength and speed are no weaker than the former Captain America, and perhaps even stronger. We just don't know how long his displayed strength and speed can be sustained, as well as how strong his defense is. However, based on the known information, ordinary task forces would find it difficult to cause harm to the other party, and this kind of person is only at the level of a lower-level ninja. Considering his age, it's not impossible to say that he's a recent graduate as a lower-level ninja. Above this, there are middle-level ninjas, upper-level ninjas, and possibly even higher levels that we are not aware of." "Higher levels?" Nick Fury asked in surprise. "Yes, Director. According to the intelligence, there is already an upper-level ninja in Charles Doyle's vicinity, and this upper-level ninja also follows Charles's orders. That means there must be someone giving orders above this level, instructing her to obey Charles's commands." After pondering for a moment, Nick Fury said, "It's quite reasonable. In a world of extraordinary powers, strength is paramount. Weak individuals cannot truly command the powerful." Nick Fury couldn't help but think of his old friend Carol Danvers. Although he could ask for her help, he couldn't command her to do anything. Otherwise, she wouldn't be out there traveling through the stars but would be left on Earth, obeying the government or military's orders. "Director, based on the currently known intelligence, I suggest that we refrain from conflicts with them for the time being. Our main focus should be on determining their numbers, strength, and scale. Moreover, through this mission commission, we can directly utilize their strength to complete some tasks and conduct some tests." Nick Fury was astonished. "Are you suggesting that we commission tasks to them?" Like hiring mercenaries, or outsourcing some military tasks. Coulson nodded. This intelligence mission was proposed by Charles. He also emphasized the rules. His agency itself accepts various commissioned tasks. We can use this method to entrust them with some particularly arduous, or even military tasks. On the one hand, it can reduce our losses, and on the other hand, it can be a way to test their strength. After all, although the other party has informed us about the differences in ninja ranks, some detailed data is still unclear. Additionally, during the conversation with Charles, I recorded the entire process with a pinhole camera. The scientific team will analyze the intelligence information later. Upon hearing Coulson's suggestion, Barton suddenly spoke up, "Director, outsourcing military tasks doesn't seem to comply with the rules." Seeing Barton speak, Nick Fury pondered for a moment before saying, "Indeed, it's a bit off the rules. We can discuss this matter again. But Coulson, I agree with your point. Let's not engage in conflict with them for now. Our main goal should be to obtain more comprehensive intelligence. Natasha, what have you gained from your end?" Natasha flicked her fiery red hair and then spoke, "I will try to establish a friendly relationship with them, but I feel it's not easy." Upon hearing Natasha's words, Nick Fury emphasized, "If that's the case, be cautious and don't provoke them. You already have the identity of a special agent when meeting them, so make good use of this. Perhaps in the environment they grew up in, what they value more is honesty and sincerity. You should handle the details yourself." "Understood, Director." Natasha replied. "Coulson, you stay. The two of you can go out first." Natasha and Barton exited the room. Seeing Barton about to leave, Natasha tugged at his arm and then said, "Barton, don't act recklessly." Barton stopped in his tracks, turned to face Natasha, and calmly said, "Natasha, I didn't act recklessly. You know that what happened earlier was not in accordance with the rules." Natasha shook her head and then said, "Forget it, let's go have a drink together. Maybe you're not in a good state today." Upon hearing Natasha's invitation, Barton didn't refuse. His state today was indeed not good, and he needed a good drink. In the office, after Barton and Natasha left, Nick Fury discussed with Coulson the direction of the intelligence they needed to understand, as well as which issues were not so sensitive and could be tested through successive commissions. Also, they discussed how many energy blocks they would need to bring next time, considering that Charles had hinted at raising the price next time. Chapter 156, Decision. On the other side, S.H.I.E.L.D brought 2 boxes of energy blocks from the agency's warehouse to Charles's office. As for how S.H.I.E.L.D knew about this, Her has already obtained this information as soon as Nick Fury approved Coulson's plan. In Charles's agency. After returning to his room and freshening up, Charles sat on the bed with crossed legs, immediately accessing the system. With 2,944 gold coins in hand, Charles spent 1,680 to purchase 10 ninja recruitment scrolls, leaving 1,264 coins. As the count for Tsunade's 40 fragments was not far off, Charles did not wish to wait. He was determined to conduct a ninja recruitment. After the purchase, Charles exited the system space and decided to try a more powerful invocation than the last time. With hands together and after a silent prayer to Pangu, Charles's consciousness entered the system space. Ninja recruitment, 10 consecutive draws, go. A whirlpool symbol of the land of whirlpools appeared, radiating an unusual light. After a shimmering glow, the recruitment results appeared before Charles. Ding! Obtained A Ninja, Kuratsuki, 4 fragments. Ding! Obtained B Ninja, Wind Speed Chronicles, Naruto Uzumaki, 1 fragment. Ding! Obtained B Ninja, Young Kakashi Hatake, 4 fragments. Ding! Obtained C Ninja, Temari, 2 fragments. Ding! Obtained B Ninja, Sunin, Tsunade, 4 fragments. Ding! Obtained B Ninja, Young Kakashi Hatake, 1 fragment. Ding! Obtained C Ninja, Shizuan, 1 fragment. Ding! Obtained B Ninja, Young Kakashi Hatake, 4 fragments. Ding! Obtained C Ninja, Jiraiya, 2 fragments. Ding! Obtained C Ninja, Ninja Student, Naruto Uzumaki, 1 fragment. After the recruitment, Charles scanned his summoning interface and immediately spotted Tsunade's recruitment result, 4 fragments. It wasn't the desired 9 fragments, but it also wasn't just the guaranteed 1 fragment, so Charles found this result acceptable. Knowing that he had accumulated 32 fragments for Tsunade, with just 1 or 2 more Tendro recruitments, Charles could bring her over to his side, which filled him with determination. Satisfied with Tsunade's recruitment result, Charles shifted his gaze to the other results. He immediately noticed 3 images of young Kakashi, 2 of which were explosive results, with a total of 9 fragments. Surprised by this, Charles recalled the previous Kakashi fragments, totaling 25. With this latest draw of 9 fragments, he would have 33 fragments. Just 1 more explosive draw and he would have the desired 40 fragments. The long-awaited Kakashi was about to make an appearance, but Charles wondered what would happen if Kakashi and Captain America, who were both evenly matched with every one of their opponents, were to fight. There shouldn't be much suspense, right? But how amusing it would be for characters like Sasuke and Naruto to find out that their teacher is even younger than them. Charles turned his attention back to the other ninja recruitment results: Kuratsuki, Naruto Uzumaki from the Wind Chronicles, Temari, Shizuan, Jiraiya, and Naruto Uzumaki as a student. He reviewed all the information and realized that new ninjas had emerged this time. Temari, the C-level ninja, had met the recruitment requirements. Charles tallied the results of the 10 consecutive draws, 24 fragments in total. There were 4 fragments of A-level ninjas, 14 fragments of B-level ninjas, and 6 fragments of C-level ninjas. Clearly, the recruitment of young Kakashi was a big success. After collecting all the ninja fragments, Charles checked his gold coins and realized that he didn't have enough for another Tendro recruitment. Consequently, he abandoned the idea of single draws since he didn't have the confidence to draw Tsunade twice in a row. Exiting the ninja recruitment, Charles clicked on his ninja page, where a new ninja, Temari, appeared. The screen indicated that the fragments were complete and asked if he wanted to recruit her. Without hesitation, Charles clicked to recruit her. Ding! Recruitment successful. You have obtained the new ninja, Temari. A new screen appeared before Charles, displaying Temari with a sand ninja forehead protector around her neck and a half-opened fan beside her. Opening the ninja details, Charles first focused on the ninja's skills. Temari, C-level ninja. Skills: Temari Whirlwind, Whirlwind Barrage, Temari's Dance of the Wind Formation. Temari Whirlwind, throw wind blades that will rapidly rotate forward for a distance before losing its momentum. Whirlwind Barrage, use the fan to create vacuum blades and storm attacks in front. Temari's Dance of the Wind Formation, Temari uses the fan to rotate at high speed as she jumps up to form a huge tornado, attacking nearby enemies. Note: during this secret technique, you can control movement. Observing these 3 skills and Temari's ninja appearance, Charles noticed commentary on Temari's shoulder. It seems she is also a ninja with a summoning beast. Charles didn't pay any attention to the 3-star fan in Temari's possession, as wielding a giant fan as a weapon would damage his image. However, he was extremely satisfied with the wind attribute accompanying these 3 skills. Having successfully recruited Temari, Charles's chakra increased significantly, and he acquired an additional wind attribute. He realized that he only gained corresponding chakra attributes when the skills with attributes appeared. Like Naruto Uzumaki, who had the wind attribute, when he recruited this ninja, Charles only gained the standard C-level ninja chakra, while other attributes remained unchanged. Only when summoning Temari with wind attribute skills did Charles gain the corresponding chakra attribute. Looking at the cute Temari before him and the only remaining deployment slot, Charles was a little conflicted. Tsunade was about to be summoned soon, possibly within the next few days. If he summoned Temari now, he would have to consider the deployment situation when recruiting Tsunade next time. After pondering for a moment, Charles said to Temari in front of him, "I'll bring you out when I have some more deployment slots and enough gold coins. This position will be reserved for my beautiful Tsunade." Seeing the smiling Temari before him, Charles didn't linger any longer and directly exited the system interface. Chapter 157, The Delivered Energy Blocks. Exiting the system interface, Charles laid on the bed, gazing at the ceiling as thoughts of the smiling Temari crossed his mind, followed by the graceful figure of Tsunade. After a moment of consideration, Charles reaffirmed his choice of Tsunade. After all, Tsunade was about to arrive, and a showdown between Temari and Tsunade would undoubtedly favor Tsunade. As Charles was lost in thought, the door was suddenly knocked. Knock, knock, knock. Turning over and getting out of bed, Charles opened the door to find Irika standing outside. "Is there something you need?" "Lord Charles, 2 agents have arrived downstairs for submitting mission. Upon hearing that agents had arrived, Charles was somewhat surprised. Weren't Coulson and the others just left? Did they come back so soon? Sensing Charles's confusion, Erica spoke again. They brought 2 briefcases, much like the one Coulson brought earlier. Upon hearing this, Charles's eyes lit up, and he immediately said, "You can have them wait in the reception room. I'll be right down." After changing clothes, Charles arrived outside the reception room. Before coming over, he had taken a blank mission scroll in his hand. Upon opening the door, Charles saw a bald man and a burly man. Seeing the bald man, Charles's heart skipped a beat. Anyone bold enough to shave their head wasn't someone to be trifled with, be it Ancient One, Saitama, or Purple Head. After confirming the faces of the 2 men, Charles felt relieved. He could handle this bald man without any panic. "What kind of mission do you want to entrust to Charles's agency?" Charles smiled as he walked over to the sofa in front of the 2 men. Looking at the 2 men in front of him, Charles quickly recognized them as Pierce's assistant and Crossbones. He glanced at the 2 suitcases beside them and nodded in satisfaction. Taking a moment to contemplate, Brock Rumlow looked at Charles and said after a moment, "We want to establish a long-term partnership with you. What do you think? I know you need this thing. Both of these cases contain this item and can be used as a down payment." Seeing how generous Hydra was being, Charles smiled and said, "What's the mission? As long as the mission's price is reasonable, we'll take on any normal task here." Charles continued, "But an exclusive partnership is impossible." Hearing Charles's response, Brock Rumlow thought to himself, as expected. As long as we submit a mission, we can get things done. But the hope of subduing him is probably slim. Brock Rumlow didn't insist and instead placed 3 photos on the table in front of Charles, saying, "I need to commission a mission to kill these 3 people within a week. The price is 30 energy stones. Will you take this mission?" Picking up the 3 photos from the table, Charles looked at them and realized he had no impression of these 3 individuals. So he said, "No problem, at this price, our agency will take on the mission. However, we need you to provide information on these 3 individuals. Of course, incomplete information is acceptable. We just need the clothes they've worn." Upon hearing Charles's response, Crossbones glanced at him deeply. Did this mean that the other party possessed the ability to track by scent? "No problem. I will provide you with the information and items tomorrow, but you only have 1 week. Okay, leave it to Charles's agency. We guarantee that the mission will be completed within a week." Charles immediately took out the mission scroll and began filling it out. After completing the writing, he handed it over to the other party for signature and confirmation. Brock Rumlow wasted no time and picked up the scroll, filling it out. He seemed very familiar with the procedures of the agency and had no qualms about it. After signing, Brock Rumlow opened the 2 cases, revealing the 30 energy blocks inside. He said, "Here is the commission fee. I'll pay you all at once. I hope to hear good news from you in a week." Charles made an OK gesture, indicating that he had no problem taking it on. Subsequently, Brock Rumlow and Crossbones left Charles's agency directly, without any delay, and didn't take the suitcases with them. As they got in the car, Brock Rumlow asked, "Will the monitoring in the interlayer of the suitcase be discovered by them?" Crossbones wasn't sure and said, "I'm not sure if it will be discovered. As long as the other party swaps the suitcase to conceal the energy blocks, the tracking in our suitcases will be completely invalidated." "Sir, Coulson and the others have commissioned some intelligence tasks. Why haven't you commissioned any intelligence tasks here?" Brock Rumlow smiled and said, "Let Coulson and the others take care of the intelligence. We can get it directly from them later. If we ask the same questions again, Nick Fury might find out that someone in the Bureau is inquiring about the same thing, and it will only complicate things. It's a pity we couldn't tamper with the energy blocks. Otherwise, if we added some tracking devices inside them, we might have been able to find the location of the Hidden Leaf Village." "Sir, are you saying that Charles will take the energy blocks back to the Hidden Leaf Village for use?" Brock Rumlow wasn't very certain and said, "It's possible that he'll take them back, but the possibility isn't low. After all, that's their headquarters. If he wants to study and use these things, it's more likely to happen there." Upon hearing Brock Rumlow's words, Crossbones smiled and took out a tablet computer from the seat next to him, logging into the monitoring and positioning system of the suitcase. However, shortly after the positioning was turned on, it suddenly disappeared from the monitoring screen. Damn it, he found it. Seeing this result, Brock Rumlow was slightly disappointed but didn't mind it. This was within our expectations. If he were that easy to track down, I'm afraid he wouldn't have made it this far, let alone have such a big reputation. Upon hearing Brock Rumlow's words, Crossbones didn't say much and silently put away his tablet computer. Meanwhile, Charles at the agency submitted the mission scroll to the Mission Assembly Hall after the visitors left. The Mission Assembly Hall determined it as a C-level mission. It seemed to be unrelated to superhumans, so Charles didn't pay much attention. Looking at the 2 open suitcases on the table, a total of 30 energy blocks, Charles slapped his forehead. He had been careless earlier, he shouldn't have absorbed the previous 15 directly. He should have left 6. Chapter 158, Meeting. Thinking about how the previous 10 draw only required 9 energy blocks to solve, Charles felt a pang of regret. Gathering 648 more would get him 12,960 coins, enough not only to bring Tsunade to his world but also to open 1 or 2 more combat slots. This unexpected result caught Charles off guard. Looking at the 2 boxes of energy blocks on the table, Charles decided not to recharge immediately but to consider storing them until he gathered 36 energy blocks. Although Charles wanted to recharge immediately and recruit Tsunade to his side, he ultimately suppressed the desire to recharge directly. Having made up his mind, Charles stopped hesitating and directly waved to store the 2 boxes and the energy blocks inside into his storage space. As Charles left the meeting room, he saw a news bulletin on the TV in the lobby. A-22 Raptor fighter jet crashed during routine flight training yesterday. Luckily, our pilot is unharmed. As for the unexpected events in the Gulmara region, it is still unclear who is responsible and what the motive is. But I can assure you that the government is not involved in this matter. Seeing Colonel Rhodes confidently discussing on the news, Charles knew that Tony's Mark armor seemed to have been developed. Not only Charles saw this news, Obadiah, who was resting at home, also watched the entire news seriously. On the other side, in Stark's mansion, Tony had taken off his entire suit and changed into casual clothing. Pepper Potts argued a few times after seeing Tony's armory full of bullet marks and then left the mansion directly. Looking at the armor he had taken off, covered in marks and traces of gunshots, Tony instructed, "Jarvis, repair and repaint the armor." "How long will it take?" "Sir, it will take 2 hours." "Get to work, Jarvis." After instructing Jarvis, Tony looked at Parker lying in his kennel and then said, "Parker, your time protecting me is up today. Later, I will arrange a meeting with Charles, and you can go back with him." After hearing Tony Stark's words, Parker came out of his room, shook his body, and replied, "Thank you for your hospitality during this time, Mr. Tony Stark." After giving this message to Parker, Tony went upstairs, picked up the phone, and dialed Charles's number. At that moment, Charles, lying in bed, heard the sound of his phone and picked it up to find it was Tony Stark calling. He answered the call. "Hey, Charles Doyle." "Hey, Tony Stark." "Charles, I have already developed the new armor, we should have a little contest. I think tonight would be quite suitable. We won't be going to the desert area this time. The vicinity of my villa is also an option. What do you think?" said Tony. Listening to Tony's words, Charles became interested and immediately agreed. "Okay, I'll come over now," Charles replied. After hanging up the phone, Charles got up, dressed, and went to the front desk to pick up his car keys. "Irika, you're in charge here. I'm going out for a while. If a group of people delivers any materials this afternoon, make sure to sign for them," Charles instructed Irika. "Understood, Lord Charles," Irika replied. After giving Irika the instructions, Charles drove his car towards Tony's seaside villa. In a little over an hour, Charles arrived at Tony's mansion. As soon as he parked, he saw Tony Stark and Parker standing at the entrance. After getting out of the car and walking up to Tony and Parker, Charles smiled and said, "Long time no see, Tony." Tony's mood seemed somewhat somber, but he managed to smile and replied, "It's been a month." Charles glanced down at Parker and was surprised. "Parker, you've gained weight. Looks like you'll need to lose some weight when you get back." Shaking his head, Parker replied, "There's no way. The food at Mr. Stark's place is too delicious, and there isn't much opportunity for exercise here." Charles squatted down and patted Parker's head, saying, "It's okay. I believe you'll slim down when you get back." Tony turned and walked into the mansion, saying, "Come on in." The two of them, along with the dog, entered the mansion. Tony didn't take Charles directly to the underground lab but instead led him to the living room. After they settled on the sofa, Tony took out a bottle of 50-year-old Highland Night single malt whiskey from his wine cabinet. Opening the whiskey, Tony poured 2 glasses, placing one in front of Charles on the table, and held one for himself. "Cheers," Tony said, downing his drink in one go. Charles was somewhat surprised by Tony's pace but raised his glass to acknowledge Tony and took a sip. Tony then poured himself another glass after finishing his first one in a single gulp. Seeing Tony's rhythm, Charles asked directly, "Tony, aren't you supposed to show me the armor? You're really on a drunk driving spree right from the start," Charles remarked, setting down his whiskey. Tony held his glass and, with a somewhat heavy expression, said, "Charles, Yinsen is dead." "Yinsen?" Initially, Charles didn't recall, but then he remembered that Yinsen was the surgeon rescued along with Tony. "Didn't he return to his hometown?" Charles asked. Tony's expression turned solemn, and he said slowly, "His hometown is in Gulmara. Last night, I saw Yinsen's figure on the news. He was executed by the warlords of the Ten Rings. I was planning to bring back his body today for burial, but he was hit by the enemy's tank cannon." Tony didn't finish his sentence, but Charles understood what he meant. Charles didn't know what to say about this result. Tony had tried to keep Yinsen and even wanted to hire him as a personal doctor and return to New York together. But Yinsen was determined to return to his hometown, and no one expected his hometown to be attacked by the Ten Rings. Charles lifted his glass and said, "My condolences." Then he downed the whiskey in his glass, and Tony poured himself another drink. After 2 consecutive shots of whiskey, Tony was slightly tipsy and seemed a bit intoxicated. Chapter 159, The Beauty of Technology, Bonus Chapter. After Tony finished talking about Yinsen, he didn't continue to dwell on the topic. He just wanted to inform Charles about the incident. Tony has his pride and he wouldn't show too much sadness to others about this matter. He has his own way of dealing with things. Since the reason behind all this was the unauthorized sale of the company's weapons, Tony wanted to solve the problem in his own way. Checking the time on his watch, Tony realized it would take a while for Mark III to be restored. He then stood up and asked, "Charles, can your blue serpent go into the sea or race on the surface of the sea?" Not understanding why Tony's thoughts shifted so quickly, Charles thought for a moment and said, "No problem." "Can I experience the speed of AODA on the sea?" Tony inquired. "You can also experience my latest invention later," Charles replied with a smile. "Okay, didn't we agree on this last time?" Subsequently, the two of them and the dog went directly to the back of the mansion, looking at the sea below the cliff. Tony looked at Charles and said, "You can summon your blue serpent. I've handled the surveillance here, and there are no issues in the nearby waters at the moment. There won't be any submarines or ships passing through during this time period." Seeing Charles bite his finger and then make hand seals, Tony witnessed a huge smoke cloud suddenly appearing. Then AODA's 100-meter-long body materialized in the air and dropped into the sea below the cliff with a loud splash, creating massive waves. Tony watched this magical scene with curiosity. He couldn't comprehend how Charles summoned AODA through some strange gestures. It was neither scientific nor ninja-like. AODA rested on the sea surface, its 100-meter body allowing it to directly see the people on the cliff. It then spoke, "Lord Charles, do you have any orders?" Charles grabbed Tony next to him and jumped directly onto AODA's massive head. "Wow!" Tony exclaimed as he stood on the serpent's head, amazed. Charles balanced himself on the serpent's head with flowing chakra under his feet. He held onto Tony's back with one hand to keep him from falling. "Charles, your blue serpent is really cool. It's truly a behemoth," Tony said, awestruck. Charles didn't respond to Tony but instead said to AODA, "AODA, proceed at full speed on the surface of the sea in the direction ahead. Cover a distance of 10 nautical miles and do not go underwater during this time." AODA's booming voice echoed in their ears, "Understood, Lord Charles." In the next moment, AODA lowered its body and floated on the water's surface. Then, like an arrow released from a bowstring, it swiftly raced towards the distance. Due to the speed being too fast, the serpent raised 2 waves on either side of its body, creating a magnificent sight. However, as it was already nighttime, no one else noticed except for the two of them. As for Parker, he stood on the edge of the cliff and didn't follow them, even though his speed was also fast and could run on the sea. Oda's high-speed run caused Tony, standing on the serpent's head, to experience a gust of wind. Tony attempted to shout, but in the moment his mouth opened, the wind distorted his face, making it impossible for him to make any sound. Observing this, Charles positioned himself in front of Tony, shielding him from the wind. Tony looked at Charles in front of him and said, "Charles, don't you need to watch the sea ahead?" Charles held onto Tony's shoulders and laughed, "Tony, you're too weak. I'm afraid you'll be blown away by the wind. How about we slow down a bit?" Even though Charles blocked the wind, Tony still found it difficult to speak. "All right, you're right, Charles. Oda, reduce the speed by half," he barely managed to say. Charles nodded and also instructed, "Oda, reduce speed by half." The serpent soon received the command and slowed down, making Tony much more comfortable. "Charles, your blue serpent is really cool," Tony exclaimed, extending his arms to feel the gust of wind and feeling much better. "This feeling is really exciting. It's completely different from the sensation of racing or riding a roller coaster," Tony said. "If I could enjoy it without your help, I would love to sit up there by myself." Charles didn't say much, just listening to Tony's amazement. Soon, Oda raced for 10 nautical miles with the two aboard and then returned. After the round trip, Tony's hair once again turned into a mess. However, this sensation still excited Tony. However, it wasn't very convenient to keep Oda at the mansion, and without Charles's help, Tony couldn't stay fixed on Oda's body. Otherwise, Tony would have thought about hiring Oda for a month. Back at the mansion, Tony tidied himself up. By now, Jarvis had completely repaired Mark III. "Pal, I've experienced your blue serpent. Now it's your turn to experience my latest masterpiece. You'll feel a different kind of joy," Tony said, leading Charles to the underground lab. Tony went directly to the dressing area of the armor and called out, "J.A.R.V.I.S." Several mechanical arms emerged from the ground and began to dress Tony in the Mark III suit. Watching Tony putting on the Mark III with the help of the mechanical arms, Charles had to admit the beauty of the machinery was quite cool. Tony quickly put on the Mark III, then moved his fingers and opened the front of the helmet. "There's a big difference between this and the one in the cave. How about it? Isn't it cool?" Tony asked, showing off. Observing Tony Stark displaying himself, Charles nodded and complimented, "Indeed, it's cool. But how do I experience it? Are you planning to grab me and fly?" Charles joked. "Or should I ride on you?" Upon hearing Charles's words, Tony cursed, "No way. How could I let you ride me and fly? Don't even think about it." Then, Tony pointed to the silver-white Mark II beside him and said, "This is the Mark II prepared for you. It's the same as mine, except it has no weapons or ammunition and isn't painted." Upon hearing that Tony had prepared the Mark II for him, Charles didn't hesitate. He went to the armor platform and soon several mechanical arms dressed him in the Mark II. Observing Charles fully suited in the Mark II, Tony took out a new small arc reactor from a drawer, specifically designed for Charles to experience the armor. Tony approached Charles with the reactor and fitted it onto him. Soon, Charles's Iron Man armor was officially activated. Chapter 160, Sparring. With the installation of the power source, the lights at the eye sockets of Charles's Mark II armor lit up, and the suit officially powered on. "Hello, Mr. Charles. I am Jarvis. "Hello, Jarvis. Looking at the virtual projection in front of his eyes, Charles felt cool. After moving his fingers slightly, he opened the faceplate. Meanwhile, Tony, in his Mark III armor, looked at Charles, who had already adapted to the suit, and said, "Let's go outside for a spin." With that, Tony closed his faceplate and flew out first. Seeing Tony piloting the Mark III armor out of the underground lab, Charles followed suit without hesitation, closing his faceplate and joining him. Although it was his first time using the Mark armor, Charles quickly mastered flying. After all, in his previous life, he had watched Tony's flying maneuvers many times. With J.A.R.V.I.S.'s assistance, he soon caught up with Tony. Once outside, Charles wasted no time and immediately tried some fancy flying maneuvers. With J.A.R.V.I.S.'s assistance, moves that were challenging for most fighter jets became remarkably simple. Whether it was the Cobra maneuver, aerial somersaults, or sudden stops and ascents, Charles thoroughly enjoyed experiencing them all. Although these maneuvers were not as challenging as operating a fighter jet and lacked the feeling of strong wind blowing, the change in perspective allowed Charles to experience the joy of flight. Charles flew over the sea and even attempted some palm blasts. Although the Mark II armor was not equipped with a weapon system, it was still easy to perform these actions. While having fun, Charles received a call request, which he promptly accepted. Haha, how is it? Do you feel something different? Tony's voice came through. Tony, your inventions are great and very creative, but I prefer your intelligent butler. Apart from the energy core and other core components, the Mark armor was equipped with advanced shock absorption systems and assisted by artificial intelligence. Among these, what interested Charles the most was the AI. In his base, he needed a reliable artificial intelligence to handle some trivial matters. Have you considered selling me an artificial intelligence? I think it's fantastic. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Charles, Jarvis responded inside both of their armors. Hearing Charles's immediate interest in his invention, Tony smiled. Jarvis not up for sale, and creating an AI is not simple. It requires a considerable amount of computing space and corresponding equipment. I can consider it, though manufacturing an intelligent AI is no easy task. Tony considered his spare ace. Besides Dummy and Friday, he hadn't developed any other backup ace yet. Although Tony didn't give a direct response, Charles understood that there was potential in this request. Charles's main purpose for wanting an AI was to manage daily tasks at his base, allowing him to experience only the high-tech lifestyle without needing the AI to do experiments or armor operations. It was like a man who sees a fascinating new toy and buy to thoroughly enjoy it, if he is able to. Who could resist artificial intelligence? This was genuine artificial intelligence, not some artificial idiot. Okay, I'll await your message. Tony, shall we spar now? Looking at the Mark II armor floating on the sea, Tony said, no problem, but do you need to go back to the mansion first and take off your armor? You don't intend to spar with me wearing that suit, do you? No need for that trouble, Tony. Charles enveloped the entire Mark II armor with chakra and then, with a single thought, retrieved it into his storage space. It was a simple way that Charles had come up with to remove the armor. While putting on the armor might not be so easy, storing it in the storage space was convenient. Tony's eyes widened as he watched the Mark II armor disappear from Charles's body and then saw Charles descend from the air. This sudden scene gave Tony a lot of inspiration. Perhaps he also needed to consider the portability of the armor. Sir, I've lost the signal of Mark II, J.A.R.V.I.SS voice sounded in the armor. Hearing J.A.R.V.I.SS words, Tony didn't hesitate and immediately sped over. He wasn't worried about the whereabouts of his Mark II armor, but rather about Charles possibly drowning from the fall. After retrieving the armor, Charles landed smoothly on the sea. He let chakra flow under his feet, standing steadily on the water's surface. As Tony arrived, he witnessed this scene and exclaimed, "Man, how did you do that? I stored the armor in my storage space. It's more convenient and saves time." "No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking how you managed to stand on the sea's surface, just like standing on the ground." Charles smiled and took a few steps, completely concealing any support under the sea. Furthermore, this wasn't even the seaside, and there were no reefs below. "Sir, after scanning, there is nothing but sea water below. No support whatsoever," J.A.R.V.I.SS voice rang in the armor. At this moment, Charles said with a smile, "This is a basic technique of a ninja." Basic technique? Tony couldn't comprehend what kind of ninja used walking on water as a basic technique. Then, Charles assumed a sparring stance and said, "Tony, let's start sparring now. Wait until we finish fighting before we talk." "Okay, but be careful." Tony's expression also became serious, but he wasn't very worried. After all, his armor was made of the same material as the tactical satellite, Angel of Light, which was titanium gold alloy. Charles then produced several shurikens between his hands and immediately launched them at Tony in the air. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of metal clashing sparked numerous sparks. Feeling the force of the shuriken's impact, Tony was stunned. The shurikens thrown by Charles at the armor were even more powerful than bullets. After recovering from the surprise, Tony didn't stand still as a target but instead piloted the armor to fly over. Not knowing how strong Charles's defense was, Tony didn't immediately use missiles or palm blasts but instead prepared for close combat. Seeing Tony getting closer, Charles seized this opportunity and directly used Rock Lee's taijutsu. Endless Barrage. With a flash, multiple afterimages appeared behind Charles. He then appeared in front of Tony and delivered a series of 11 punches, all hitting Tony's armor. The final punch was a charged strike, producing a sonic boom. Boom. Tony was directly blasted away by Charles, tumbling uncontrollably on the sea's surface. Fortunately, with J.A.R.V.I.S.'s assistance, he didn't fall directly into the ocean. Just as he stabilized his armor, Tony heard J.A.R.V.I.S.'s voice in his ear. "Sir, external armor is damaged, the damage is 11%. Chapter 161, Dismantling Iron Man. What? Tony's face was full of shock. Everything that had just happened had completely shattered his worldview. He knew Charles Doyle was very powerful, not an ordinary person, but he didn't expect it to be this exaggerated. To actually inflict damage on the gold titanium alloy armor with his physical body was simply inhuman. Charles looked at Tony hovering nearby and didn't continue to attack. Instead, he said, "Tony, use your full strength, don't worry about harming me." Upon hearing Charles's words, Tony considered the opponent's strength and began to attempt long-range attacks, raising his hand for a palm blast. However, Tony's movements seemed incredibly slow to Charles, so much so that he didn't need to activate his Sharingan to enhance his visual dynamics and reflexes. He easily dodged the attack with just a shift. The energy blast hit the sea beside them, creating a considerable shockwave. Seeing that his attack had no effect, Tony directly used JARVIS to assist with targeting, then proceeded to unleash a barrage of palm blasts. However, waves billowed on the sea surface, but not even a single attack hit Charles. This made Tony realize that his reaction speed might be slow compared to Charles. Perhaps every time he raised his hand to attack, the opponent already sensed it and evaded it immediately. "Tony, if your armor has only this much attack power, then I'll have to end the fight now." Standing on the sea surface, Charles softly spoke. Seeing that he couldn't even hit Charles, Tony no longer controlled the palm blasts and even directly activated the missiles on his shoulders. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A dozen small missiles were launched directly at Charles on the sea surface at high speed with J.A.R.V.I.S.'s guidance and aiming. Substitution Jutsu. Then all of Tony's attacks hit the substitution wood. "Sir, the target has undergone an unknown change, and the attack was unsuccessful." "I saw it." Charles, who had used the substitution jutsu to evade the attack, didn't wait in place for Tony's counterattack but instead sprinted towards him with all his might. Chakra surged, and although Charles didn't open the 8 gates, his speed had already reached the speed of sound. In just a second, he arrived 100 meters away from Tony and delivered another punch. Thunk! A muffled sound, and Tony stumbled backward. Leaf Gale! Charles followed up with an airborne spinning kick to Tony's head, then a spinning leg kick to his legs while he was still trying to react, sending Tony flying with a powerful kick. Taking advantage of the empty space created by the kick, Tony accelerated, quickly distancing himself from Charles. At this point, Tony also knew he wasn't Charles's match. He no longer held back, unleashing all his firepower, missiles, palm blasts, and everything else that he had on his suit, all fired. Boom, boom, boom. A large amount of seawater splashed up, obstructing Tony's vision. JARVIS, did it hit? "Sir, I am scanning for life signs and have not detected the target." At this moment, Charles's figure suddenly appeared above the waves, with veins bulging on his forehead and chakra surging out, forming a visible chakra vortex. Charles had directly activated the 8 inner gates, preparing for a round of dismantling the armor with his bare hands. Without using the power of the 8 gates, he could indeed defeat Tony, but it wouldn't be as fast as dismantling the armor barehanded. Warning: a huge unknown energy source detected above. Tony immediately looked up and quickly locked onto Charles in the sky. Before he could counterattack, he saw Charles appear in front of him. Shooting Star Smash! Charles dodged the earlier attacks and leaped into the air, delivering a punch that sent Tony crashing down. Warning: mech damage has reached 20%. However, Charles's speed was faster than Tony's descent, and he appeared directly below Tony. At this point, Charles's speed has reached supersonic levels. Charles's hands turned into claws, and he demonstrated what it meant to dismantle armor barehanded. Every strike on Tony tore a piece of armor off his body. Warning: mech damage has reached 30%. Warning, mech damage has reached 50%. Warning, flight system has been damaged. Then with a crisp sound, the virtual screen in front of Tony turned black, and J.A.R.V.I.S.S assistance went offline. The next second, Charles directly removed Tony's faceplate, and it fell into the sea with a splash. Apart from damaging the reactor on Tony's chest, Charles had dismantled all the other armor components. Of course, he didn't throw anything away, all the removed parts were stored in the storage space. Tony, who had fallen into the sea, could not resurface and was instead pulled down by the remaining piece of armor, swallowing several mouthfuls of seawater in the process. Tony couldn't even open his mouth to call for help. Each time he tried, a large amount of seawater threatened to rush in. Seeing Tony sinking without resurfacing, Charles dived down with an acceleration and pulled Tony up from the sea. Sitting on the shore, Tony started to cough violently. In that moment just now, he had once again felt the approach of death. If Charles hadn't pulled him up, he felt like he might have really kicked the bucket and drowned to death. After the coughing subsided, Tony took a few deep breaths. At this moment, a gust of sea wind blew, and the damp Tony immediately sneezed. Tony turned his head and looked at Charles Doyle standing beside him, but remained silent for a long time. Was this still the world he knew? Someone could actually dismantle armor made of the same material as the Archangel satellite with their bare hands. Wouldn't that mean the person could dismantle a satellite with their bare hands too? After a moment of silence, Tony spoke, "Charles, how many ninjas of your caliber are there?" Upon hearing Tony's sudden question, Charles thought for a moment. The Sunin, the cage of each village from the 1st to 5th generation, the Jinchuriki, elite ninjas, cage-level powerhouses, and those with the Mangekyo Sharingan. After contemplating for a moment, Charles said, "My strength might not even make in the list." Upon hearing Charles's words, Tony coughed violently again, then gave Charles a look that seemed to say, "Though I know very little about ninjas, don't lie to me." Seeing Tony's reaction, Charles smiled and said, "What's wrong? Has the great inventor Tony Stark been dealt a blow?" Chapter 162, The Agreed Rematch. How is that possible? Give me time, and I can definitely develop a stronger suit of armor. We can have another match when I've developed the new armor, Tony said, refusing to accept defeat. Evidently, this confrontation had given him many new ideas about his armor, and he believed that with time, he could create an even more formidable suit. By the time you upgrade your armor, I'll also enhance my abilities. I believe that my strength will improve much faster than the speed at which you upgrade your armor, Charles replied. Tony was trying to get up but found that the few remaining pieces of armor on his body were pressing him down, preventing any movement. "Hey, lend me a hand, help me remove the remaining parts," Tony requested. Charles didn't refuse and swiftly stripped away the remaining pieces of Tony's armor, placing them all in the storage space. Later, the two returned to the villa. Tony went upstairs to change his clothes, while Charles took out Mark II from the storage space and placed it in Tony's lab, alongside the parts of Mark III. Looking at Mark II and the Mark III parts in front of him, Tony exclaimed, "Your ability is really convenient. I believe you will also be able to develop similar equipment in the future." Charles replied, evoking a faint smile from Tony. In truth, Tony was already tired of ordinary compliments. He was a very proud and self-absorbed person, but being praised by someone who had overwhelmed him in combat and possessed many special abilities today made him feel very good. "As long as you give me time, I believe everything will be fine," Tony said. At that moment, Charles stood up and said, "Tony, I have experienced your armor today, and we have had our match. I will have to leave now." "All right, when I develop a stronger suit of armor, we can have another match. I will definitely defeat you next time," Tony replied. "Oh, and don't forget to bring Parker back with you." "Of course, if you forget, I don't mind adopting him," Tony added. Charles chuckled and said, "I'll be waiting for your message. But you don't need to worry about Parker. Once it's past 12 o'clock, he'll go back on his own," Charles assured Tony. Upon hearing Charles say that Parker would return on his own, Tony didn't say much. He just waved his hand, bidding farewell to Charles. After Charles left, Tony sat on his own workbench, lost in thought. After a while, he spoke up, "Jarvis, did we completely record our battle?" "I have recorded the entire video of your fight with Mr. Charles," Jarvis replied. "Analyze his strength and attack speed." "Sir, Charles's speed varies at different times. A photo of the normal state Charles Doyle appeared in front of Tony. At this moment, Mr. Charles's speed is at the level of sound. After this, a picture of Charles Doyle opening the 8 gates appeared in front of Tony. At this moment, Mr. Charles's speed reaches supersonic levels, JARVIS continued. And this speed cannot be determined as his maximum speed. Most importantly, his reaction speed is also very fast. If we consider only the movement speed, the Mark III armor's speed is not slower than his, but that's the maximum flight speed of the armor, and his reaction time is what's truly terrifying. As for strength, based on the force of his strikes, it is currently impossible to calculate a specific value. However, being able to easily strip off the gold titanium alloy armor indicates a force of more than 10 tons. After all, the armor's thickness is not very high. Upon hearing this data, Tony exclaimed in surprise, "So, in front of him, even Captain America would be like a baby." "Sir, in fact, you are not much different from a baby in front of him," JARVIS retorted. "Damn!" Tony cursed upon hearing JARVIS mocking him. "Save the data of this battle video on my private server and encrypt it," Tony ordered. "Then begin repairing the armor." Meanwhile, on the other side, Obadiah Stane received a call from the Ten Rings Zayla. He arrived in Megala with a group of his men. Zayla stood at the entrance of the camp, welcoming Obadiah as he got out of the car. "Welcome." Obadiah, wearing a smile, walked up to Zayla, examining her from top to bottom. "If you had killed him earlier, you wouldn't have suffered such significant losses," Obadiah commented. "I heard that your side was attacked today as well." However, Obadiah soon got down to business and said, "Let me see what you've got." Zayla's voice grew heavy as she said, "Hold on, have your bodyguards wait outside." Obadiah gestured for his guards to stay outside and then followed Zayla into her tent. Inside the tent, Obadiah noticed a stack of blueprints on the table, along with a laptop. Zayla approached the computer and quickly played a video of Tony testing the Mark I suit at the cave entrance. Watching the video on the computer, Obadiah picked up the blueprints from the table and quickly exclaimed, "So, he used this to escape." As the video continued, Obadiah saw someone he recognized. The man who had met with Tony Stark at Stark Industries appeared in the surveillance footage. Obadiah paused the video on the man's face and asked, "Who is this man, and why is he here?" Seeing the man on the screen, Zayla's pupils slightly constricted, and she said, "Tony didn't escape using that, he was rescued by this man." Upon hearing Zayla's words, Obadiah remembered an expense he had incurred while searching for Tony. He previously thought it was for the military, but now it seemed it was for rescuing Tony. "Who is he?" Obadiah inquired. Zayla gazed at the man in the picture and said helplessly, "I don't know who he is. If you have any information about him, I hope you can share it with me." Zayla pointed at the blueprints in Obadiah's hand and said, "The blueprints in your hands are just preliminary drafts. He has already perfected his own work. Today, the attack on Gulmara was carried out by Tony Stark himself, using a weapon that can only be described as terrifying." Chapter 163, New Summoning Beast. Upon hearing Zayla say that what she had was just the initial design and that Tony had more advanced equipment, Obadiah Stane thought of the military press conference he had seen earlier that day. At this moment, Zayla looked at Obadiah and said, "If there were a dozen of these ultimate weapons, it would be enough for me to conquer Asia. And you would be able to have his kingdom," she continued. The kingdom she referred to was none other than Stark Industries. Zayla moved away from the computer and sat down on the nearby sofa, pouring herself a drink as she spoke. "If we continue to cooperate, I will give you all these design drawings and video data as a gift." Obadiah put the blueprints together, revealing the appearance of the Mark I armor. Looking at the hollow position in the Mark I blueprint and the markings on it, Obadiah seemed pensive. Zayla, holding her glass, looked at Obadiah and continued, "In return, I hope you can provide me with an army of iron men." Observing Zayla's raised glass, Obadiah took a few steps toward her, smiling, placing one hand on her shoulder and taking the glass from her with the other. The next second, Zayla was paralyzed by the low-frequency sound emitted from a device in Obadiah's hand, which resembled an MP3 player in size. "This is the only gift you'll receive," Obadiah declared. With the glass in one hand and the device in the other, Obadiah disabled the device and said, "Do you want technology? Technology is the fatal weakness of people like you." Seeing Zayla's eyes turning bloodshot with bulging veins, Obadiah removed the earplugs and said, Don't worry, you'll be fine in 15 minutes. You should worry about the trouble afterward. He added. Having said that, Obadiah left the tent. Outside the tent, Zayla's men were all quietly subdued by Obadiah's bodyguards and were kneeling on the ground, disarmed. Observing the scene, Obadiah ordered, "Load the computers and design blueprints into the car for me. All right, clean up the battlefield." With Obadiah's command, gunfire erupted instantly. Sitting in the car, Obadiah immediately made a call to his subordinates, instructing, "Set up Section 16 under the Arc Reactor project for all data to be kept confidential. Find the best engineers and get me a prototype as soon as possible." The next day, Charles Doyle woke up in his room and immediately entered the system space. Check-in. Ding. Check-in successful, reward, copper coins. Collecting the copper coin reward, Charles opened the mission gathering hall. Tony's commission task was already displayed as completed. He clicked to claim the rewards. Ding. Obtained 500 reputation points, 50,000 copper coins, and 1 ordinary treasure chest. After collecting all the rewards, Charles looked at his current reputation points, which had reached 21,640. Seeing the reputation points exceed 20,000, Charles didn't hesitate. It seemed like the right time to enhance the strength of his summoning beasts. After all, he had been using them as mounts, so some compensation was due. Charles directly opened the page for the summoning beasts. At the interface of the summoning beasts, Charles saw level 40 AODA and the costs required for leveling up, 1,000 reputation points and 100,000 copper coins, with the resource cost increasing with each level. Without any hesitation, Charles embarked on the journey of upgrading. With continuous upgrades, AODA quickly reached level 50, the maximum level. For this, Charles had only spent 12,000 reputation points and 1.5 million copper coins. At this moment, AODA in the spiritual world suddenly howled to the sky, causing considerable commotion in the surrounding area, smashing a large area of the forest. It was a complete recovery of AODA's strength, making it exceptionally excited. On the other end of the spiritual world, Park thought AODA had gone mad from being ridden by an ordinary person. He grumbled, "Good thing I didn't jump on its head yesterday, or it would be flying around looking for a fight with me today." Meanwhile, Charles received another system prompt after just maxing out AODA's level. Ding! AODA is at max level. Do you want to activate the new summoning beast, Gamabunta? Upon hearing about the new summoning beast, Charles immediately clicked to activate it. The next second, a new summoning beast, Gamabunta, appeared in the interface, at level 0, with its inherent skill, Water Iron Cannon. Looking at the low current upgrade cost of Gamabunta, 400 reputation points and 40,000 copper coins per level, and considering his nearly 10,000 reputation points, Charles continued his upgrading journey. After a series of operations, Charles's reputation was depleted, and he stopped the process after Gamabunta reached level 15. Satisfied with the results, he nodded. In this process, Charles spent a total of 21,640 reputation points and 4 million copper coins. Exiting the system space, Charles didn't even bother to freshen up. Instead, he directly used the reverse summoning technique to enter the spiritual world. He wanted to check his new summoning beast, Gamabunta, to determine whether it was an adult or juvenile. After all, the difference between the two was significant. Upon arriving in the spiritual world, Charles immediately summoned Gamabunta. Gamabunta, upon receiving the message, hurried towards Charles's direction, making a thumping sound with its jumps. Hearing the noise, Charles realized that it was an adult Gamabunta, as only an adult could cause such a commotion. The next second, a colossal creature 32 meters tall appeared next to Charles. Gamabunta! Charles exclaimed, and Gamabunta immediately recognized Charles as its contractor. Lord Charles! It greeted. Satisfied with the Gamabunta in front of him, Charles nodded and instructed, "Gamabunta, use Water Iron Cannon. Let me see its power." Without refusing, Gamabunta jumped and launched its attack skill. Water Iron Cannon. A massive water bomb spewed from Gamabunta's mouth, shooting towards the nearby forest. The water bomb's speed was incredibly fast, and its power was tremendous, creating a large pit in the ground after destroying a large number of trees. Satisfied with the display of power, Charles nodded. The damage inflicted was much stronger than that of a regular cannonball. After using its ninjutsu, Gamabunta stood by and asked, Any other orders, Lord Charles? Charles smiled and replied, Gamabuntat, no, I just came to see your strength. Though this place is not Mayaboku Mountain, but it's still enormous. You can choose a piece of land for yourself. In the future, your family and tribe will also appear here. If you need anything, you can tell me. Chapter 164, Short Sword. T/N, it was Gamakaki that was summoned, not Gamabuntat. Sorry for the mistake in the last chapter. Upon hearing Charles's words, Gamakaki didn't hesitate and directly replied, Lord Charles, when I came over here, I didn't bring my own weapon. Can you find a suitable short sword for me? About 16 meters long, and preferably of higher quality. If it can be infused with some chakra metal, that would be even better. As Gamakaki mentioned the 16-meter-long short sword, Charles's mouth twitched. That would be about the height of a 5-story building. Was it still appropriate to call it a short sword? However, considering Gamakaki's height, 16 meters was just about half his size, so calling it a short sword wasn't entirely inaccurate. It seemed that this was indeed his exclusive short sword. Alright, I'll go back and arrange for someone to find it for you. However, we don't have any chakra metal at the moment, but you don't need to worry about the hardness of the sword. We'll use the best metal for its construction. When we have better materials in the future, we can replace it then. Thank you very much, Lord Charles. Gamakaki replied without any reservation. As Charles thought about changing the materials, he recalled Wakanda, which occupied a vast source of vibranium on Earth, as well as the mystical heart-shaped herb. The fact that these resources were controlled by a group of people who kept them hidden and avoided any trade dealings gave Charles a headache. He thought to himself, I'll have to visit and negotiate when my strength is stronger and I have more confidence. After finalizing Gamakaki's short sword, Charles gave him a few simple instructions, advising the summoning beasts to get along amiably and avoid fighting. Charles knew that, apart from toads and snakes being archenemies, the grown Gamakaki had an exceptionally irritable temper, even more fiery than his father, Gamabuntat. If it weren't for the system's presence, they might have fought it out as soon as they came together through summoning. Luckily, Charles's spiritual world was large enough, with plenty of territory for them to divide. Otherwise, with more spiritual beasts and even larger-tailed beasts coming in the future, it would have turned into chaos. Leaving the spiritual world, Charles returned to his room, took a look at his handsome face in the mirror, and immediately went to freshen up. After tidying up, Charles walked out of his room and headed to the lounge on the first floor, where Irika was on duty at the service counter. Upon seeing Charles coming down, Irika spoke, Lord Charles, the special agent who commissioned the mission yesterday sent a chest with information and items related to the task. Charles stopped in his tracks, about to head to the dining area, and turned to the counter, saying, in that case, ask Lee, Sasuke, and Naruto to come to the dining area to find me. You come along as well. After speaking, Charles went to the dining area, found a seat, and sat down. The waiter approached and inquired about the order, but Charles took out a bowl of delicious ramen directly from his storage space. It must be said that the system's products were indeed excellent. The flavor of the delicious ramen was truly exceptional. It had been a while since Charles had eaten it, and he couldn't help but feel a bit nostalgic. As for its energy-restoring effect, Charles thought to himself, I'm just enjoying it, what's the harm? In no time, Charles finished the large bowl of delicious ramen. At that moment, Irika arrived with the 3 young ninjas. As Charles was sitting at the dining table, he was very excited to see Naruto rushing over and shouting, Good morning, Lord Charles. Charles extended his hand and ruffled Naruto's head, saying, Naruto is here, Hehe. Seeing Charles touch his head, Naruto's smile grew even wider. Since he came here, he had never felt any rejection, even from fellow ninjas like Sasuke, Rock Lee, and others. This kind of life made Naruto very happy, especially living with everyone and eating together every day. These were the kind of days he had never dared to imagine in the past. At that moment, Irika arrived near Charles with Rock Lee and Sasuke, respectfully saying, Lord Charles. Come, everyone, take a seat first, Charles said, waving his hand. Seeing everyone seated, Charles waved his hand, and a bowl of delicious ramen appeared in front of each of them. He noticed that Naruto had been eyeing his bowl of ramen, so he knew that the boy was craving it too. Seeing the appearance of the delicious ramen in front of them, Irika immediately spoke, Lord Charles, we've already had breakfast, and it's a bit extravagant to consume this delicious ramen like this. Irika and the others had always regarded the delicious ramen as strategic supplies, treating it as a military ration without side effects in this world. Upon hearing Irika's words, Naruto's visibly excited expression immediately turned a bit dejected, seeming a little sulky. On the other hand, Rock Lee and Uchiha Sasuke didn't show any particular expression. While the ramen tasted good, it wasn't something they couldn't live without. After all, everyone didn't share Naruto's passionate love for ramen. Besides, there were many other delicacies in this world, and the new chef at the agency was also very competent. Charles looked at everyone and then smiled, saying, "It's all right, Irika. We're not lacking in this thing. Occasionally eating it won't affect anything. We don't have to consume delicious ramen every day." Seeing Charles's insistence, Irika didn't refuse further. He just wanted to remind and express his thoughts. On the other hand, Naruto exclaimed, "Long live, Lord Charles." Charles waved his hand and then said with a smile, "Go ahead and eat. After you're done, I have some things to discuss with you all." "We're digging in," everyone replied. With a smile on his face, Charles watched everyone eating and couldn't help but think that he hoped this place could make up for their regrets. Thinking of Naruto's parents, besides his father, the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze, being somewhat difficult to recruit, his mother Kushina Uzumaki would be relatively easier since one was an S-rank ninja, and the other was a B-rank ninja, which were comparatively easier to solve. As for Rock Lee's mentor, Might Guy, it wasn't that difficult for Charles. Although he was an A-rank ninja and currently didn't have a shard, given the situation in the mobile game, the difficulty of recruiting shouldn't be too exaggerated. On the other hand, Charles was somewhat troubled by the parents and clan members that Sasuke wanted. Before he crossed over, he didn't have the ninja card for Fugaku and Mikoto, and he didn't see them in the recruiting interface till now. On the contrary, Sasuke didn't want to see Ataki, and there were so many different Ataki ninja cards. From Childhood Ataki, Anbu Ataki, Akatsuki Ataki, Susanoo Ataki, to Edo Tensei Ataki, there was almost every version available, and there were even some special editions from events, which were just beyond your imagination. As for other clan members, it was either Shisui or Madara. Charles believed that none of these people were the clan members that Uchiha Sasuke wanted. Charles sighed in his heart. Chapter 165, Making Up Regrets, Bonus Chapter. Sigh, it's probably going to be a long time before I fulfill the promise to recruit that kid's clan members. But maybe his teacher, Kakashi Hatake, will meet him first. Although the young Kakashi didn't have the Sharingan, it was only a matter of time before he gets it. He would probably count as Sasuke's half-clan member. As for Irika's regrets, Charles really didn't know what they were. Should he introduce him to a girlfriend? Last time he checked, Irika hadn't started a family yet. Or should he build a ninja school for him to teach it? But the problem was that there were no ninja students here. And what about resurrecting his parents who died in the Nine Tails attack? Charles thought it was unlikely, just like those mysterious clan members that Sasuke wanted. They were basically impossible to recruit. Lost in his thoughts, Charles was interrupted as Irika and the others finished their delicious ramen. "Lord Charles, do you have any missions for us?" "I'm already excited and can't wait," said Rock Lee, who was the first to finish his meal, his spirit soaring. Smiling at their high spirits, Charles replied, "Don't get too excited. It's just a C-rank mission, so it shouldn't involve extraordinary power." Upon hearing that it was a C-rank mission, the expressions of everyone didn't change. After all, for them, even a D-rank mission here was better than the D-rank missions they had in Konoha. Charles's agency rarely received requests like finding pets or items anymore. "Irika, bring over the information that they sent," Charles instructed. Irika immediately got up to retrieve the mission information. Soon, Irika returned with a large chest and took out a folder containing the mission objectives. Charles took a look and found that the targets were located in London, and they were all from the same family. The remarkable thing was that the three individuals looked completely different, and there was no resemblance at all. Charles took out photos of the three individuals and placed them on the table. Then he said, "Irika, you'll be the team leader this time. Take Naruto, Rock Lee, and Uchiha Sasuke to complete this mission within a week. If you need the help of the ninja dogs, Parker has already returned to the spiritual world. You can contact him directly through the summoning technique. Try not to expose the 5 elements seal. If you encounter extraordinary powers or professionals like magicians, make sure to report to me immediately. After completing the mission, also make a trip to the Continental Hotel in London. It's almost been a month, and they're about to settle the account. Upon hearing Charles's instructions, Erica got up and accepted. We will ensure the completion of the mission, Lord Charles. Seeing Erica's seriousness, Charles smiled and said, it's a small task. I trust you won't make any mistakes. On the other side, Pepper Potts once again arrived at Tony Stark's mansion. Opening the newly replaced laboratory door, Pepper's eyes fell on Tony, who was tinkering with the Mark III suit. Hearing the door of the lab open, Tony turned his head. He found that the newcomer was his assistant, Pepper Potts. He stood up and said, "Are you free? Can I help you with something? Go to my office, hack into the computer mainframe, and get me all the recent shipping lists." While speaking, Tony took out a box from the table in the lab and retrieved a USB-like device from inside. "Use this, it should get you in." Pepper Potts looked puzzled as she took the item from Tony's hand. Tony continued, "It might be in the administrative folder. If not, it's probably in the hidden disk. Look for the one with the smallest identification number." Pepper Potts glanced at the item in her hand and then asked Tony, "If I get this data for you, what do you plan to do with it?" Tony approached a device and began operating it manually. After hearing Pepper's question, he replied quietly, "As always, they've been conducting behind-the-scenes deals. I want to stop them and find my weapons to destroy them." Hearing her boss's words, Pepper sighed and said, "Tony, you know I'm willing to do anything for you. But if you keep acting recklessly like this, there's nothing I can do to help." Tony continued operating the device as he said, "I'll keep doing this from now on, not attending opening ceremonies, not doing charity work, and not signing any more documents. That is my only goal." Finishing his statement, Tony paused his movements, walked up to Pepper, and looked directly at her. "That's all." Pepper Potts looked at Tony and murmured, "That's all." "Then I quit," she said, and immediately tossed the item Tony had given her onto the table before turning to leave. Seeing Pepper Potts about to leave, Tony spoke again, "You've been helping me all these years, making money from the destruction caused by injustice. Now that I want to atone, you want to wash your hands off of it." Hearing Tony's words, Pepper, who was almost out of the door, turned around, her face serious. "What you're doing is no different from suicide, Tony. I don't want to be a part of it." Seeing his assistant speak like this, Tony sank into his chair and said in a low voice, "I would have killed myself if I had no reason to live. I'm not crazy, Pepper. I just finally understand what I should do. I firmly believe that there are no alternatives." Watching Tony look crestfallen, Pepper Potts took a deep breath and walked back to him. She picked up the item she had thrown on the table, then looked at Tony affectionately and said, "For you, I have no choice either." Afterward, Pepper Potts remembered the main purpose of her visit today. "Tony, while our stock prices have been declining overall, they have been recovering somewhat recently. I found out that a group of people is aggressively buying our stocks, not only on the secondary market but also likely to make a public tender offer soon. By the way, the buyer is none other than Charles Doyle." Upon hearing that Charles Doyle was the one buying the stocks, Tony didn't pay much attention. Instead, he pointed to the arc reactor on his chest and said, "He probably sees potential in this. Let him be." Seeing that Tony wasn't concerned, Pepper Potts left Tony's mansion. Watching her leave, Tony couldn't help but smile. Chapter 166, The AI at Hand. Sitting in Tony's office chair, Pepper opened the laptop on the desk, but it required a startup password. She then took the item Tony had given her from her bag and plugged it into the computer. Warning. Security system breached. Warning. Security vulnerability. System breached, access granted. The computer then began to run automatically, and the secret drive documents were accessed. Various files, including those related to Tony's missile development, were displayed. Files related to Tony Stark's Mark I were also shown, marked with District 16 file access. Seeing the unfamiliar District 16, Pepper was surprised and said, "What are you up to, Obadiah?" Soon, a video file started playing. Armed militants held a hostage, saying, "Obadiah Stane, this is Gulmara. You didn't say we were supposed to kill Tony Stark." The hostage's hood was removed, revealing Tony's face, and Pepper quickly activated the simultaneous translation. After seeing the translated content, Pepper gasped softly, "Oh, Obadiah Stane, my God." Looking at the files, Pepper immediately made copies. Suddenly, Obadiah shouted, "What about this?" Hearing Obadiah's voice, Pepper jolted, raised her head, and saw the office door being pushed open. Obadiah, upon seeing someone in the room, was also very surprised and quickly changed his tone, saying, "What about this? How should I handle it?" Entering the office, Obadiah went to the nearby table where a bottle of whiskey was placed. He opened the bottle while saying, "I know how you feel, Pepper Potts." Seeing that Pepper looked a bit off, Obadiah frowned slightly but still picked up the whiskey on the table, opened the cap, and smelled it. Tony, he never lacked good whiskey. Indeed, Obadiah had come to take Tony's drink to taste it. Seeing Obadiah's response, Pepper Potts also smiled awkwardly and used a newspaper to cover the USB drive inserted into the computer. As Obadiah finished pouring the drink and walked over with the glass, Pepper cautiously activated the screensaver. Obadiah walked up to Pepper's side, glanced at the computer that was not unlocked, and then said, "When he first came back, I was so happy, as if I had seen the light in the darkness. Now I understand. Tony never truly came back, half of him stayed in that cave. He broke my heart." Watching Obadiah sitting at the desk, Pepper Potts pondered for a moment before speaking, "Yes, he is a complex person. He has been through a lot, but he will get better." Obadiah took a sip of the whiskey in his glass, gazing at the woman in front of him, not realizing anything was wrong. He then said, "You are a rare good woman. Tony doesn't know how lucky he is." Upon hearing Obadiah's praise, despite her inner anxiety, Pepper Potts still smiled and said, "Thank you." Then she stood up and said, "I think I should be going." As she spoke, Pepper Potts picked up the newspaper on the desk and discreetly removed the USB drive from the computer, hidden behind the newspaper. Seeing Pepper Potts getting up to leave, Obadiah spoke in a deep voice, "Is that today's newspaper?" Pepper's expression darkened as she reached the door, but she still turned and smiled, saying, "Yes." Obadiah quickly walked over and extended a hand, saying, "Let me see." "Sure." Obadiah, taking the newspaper, explained, "I like to play the crossword puzzle in here." "Of course, me too." After responding to Obadiah, Pepper Potts didn't dare to linger any longer. Holding the USB drive, she immediately walked out. As she walked out of the office door, she walked to the elevator and left immediately. Obadiah, who witnessed this scene, felt that something was off. He quickly went to Tony's computer and tapped the keyboard. The screensaver disappeared instantly, and it showed that the download was complete. "Damn it!" Obadiah cursed and then angrily patted his own head before quickly getting up and following. At this moment, Pepper Potts had already reached the ground floor of the building, where Agent Coulson was sitting on the sofa. "Miss Pepper Potts, we had an appointment. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Pepper Potts saw the person speaking and immediately replied, "No, follow me." Pepper's speech was quick, and she walked with urgency. Observing Pepper's behavior, Coulson was a little confused, but he still followed her and said, "Okay." At this time, Pepper Potts turned her head and looked upstairs, directly meeting Obadiah's gaze. Pepper Potts continued walking quickly and said, "You can't imagine the news this time." Seeing Pepper Potts leave with the agent, Obadiah did not stop them in the public area but quickly headed to the exhibition area of the massive arc reactor. At this moment, several scientists who had been arranged by Obadiah to conduct research after Tony's return were working on the miniaturization research here. One of the scientists put down the phone and, seeing Obadiah storming over, immediately explained, "Sir, we have conducted the research as per your request. The situation seems a bit tricky, but in fact..." With his arms crossed, Obadiah glared angrily at the scientist and said, "A bit tricky? Yes, providing power to the Iron Man suit, that technology doesn't actually exist." "So you mean..." Wait, you said the technology doesn't exist." Obadiah grabbed the scientist and pointed to the massive arc reactor in front of them, saying, "William, the technology is right there. I just want it to be miniaturized." The scientist William also replied, "Yes, sir, that's what we are currently working on. But, to be honest, it's entirely impossible." Upon hearing that it was impossible, Obadiah pointed angrily at the scientist and shouted, "Do you know what Tony Stark made in that cave? He made it from a pile of scraps." William, being pointed by Obadiah, helplessly said, "I'm sorry, I'm not Tony Stark." Seeing the scientist claim not to be Tony, Obadiah glared at him with hatred and cursed, "Useless." At this point, Obadiah realized that time wouldn't wait for him. Although after a day and a night, he had arranged someone for the creation of a larger Iron Man suit according to the blueprints left by Tony, equipped with corresponding weapons. However, the energy core inside had yet to be developed by his subordinates for the past 2 months, which left him extremely disappointed. But thinking about the files copied by Pepper Potts, he knew that the matter might have been exposed and it seemed that he needed to act preemptively. Thinking of the miniature reactor on Tony's chest, Obadiah didn't hesitate and immediately rushed to Tony's mansion. By now, it was already dark, and Pepper Potts had shown Agent Coulson and others the evidence of Obadiah's crimes, and requested the immediate arrest of Obadiah. After obtaining their agreement of making the arrest, she took out her phone and called Tony. Tony, who was in the downstairs laboratory, heard the ringing of the phone upstairs and immediately went up. Tony quickly found his phone on the sofa and answered Pepper Potts's call. However, he suddenly felt a low hum in his ear, and his body stiffened, unable to move, as Obadiah ambushed him. Taking Tony's phone from his hand, Obadiah closed it and placed it aside before propping Tony on the sofa. "Breathe, relax, relax. Tony, do you remember this thing? Unfortunately, it didn't get government approval. It can cause temporary paralysis, which can be very useful sometimes." After speaking, Obadiah reached into a box and took out a device, the one that could remove the miniature reactor from Tony's chest. Obadiah placed the device on Tony's chest and, while operating it, said, "But you see, fate let you escape everything. Or rather, your assistant hired a person named Charles Doyle to save you." It was only after his return from meeting Zayla, based on the investigation of the whereabouts of the 100 million funds, Obadiah learned the name of this person. At this point, Obadiah had successfully removed the reactor from Tony's chest and placed it in front of him. "You see, this is your last golden egg. Do you really think that the ideas you come up with are really yours? Your father helped me build an atomic bomb. If he had been like you back then, what would the world be like?" Having completely removed the miniature reactor, Obadiah held it up in front of Tony. Holding the arc reactor in his hand, Obadiah marveled, "Truly beautiful. Tony, it is your symphony of joy. A great masterpiece. Look, this is your final legacy. Now we can say it's the core of a new generation of weapons. With it, we can firmly grasp the whole world in our hands. No doubt, I hope you can see my prototype, it's not as stingy as yours. It's a pity that you involved Pepper as well, I was planning to leave her a way out." After tidying everything up, Obadiah didn't waste any more time and simply picked up the box and left Tony Stark's mansion. On the other side, upon hearing Tony's phone suddenly go silent and then be hung up, Pepper Potts immediately understood that something had happened to Tony. This made her extremely worried. Just as she was unsure who to turn to for help with Tony, she suddenly remembered Charles Doyle, who had brought Tony back. She immediately retrieved the saved phone number from her phone and dialed it. Listening to the music on the other end of the phone, Pepper Potts anxiously pleaded, "Answer quickly, please answer." At this moment, in Charles's agency, Charles was sitting cross-legged, feeling the chakra in his body. His chakra had already become very substantial, and his chidori was at a level where he could release it easily. He was currently fine-tuning his control over it, aiming to enhance his mastery of chakra. The ringing phone beside him made Charles frown slightly, but knowing that few people knew his phone number, he got up and answered it. Seeing that it was Pepper Potts on the screen made him a bit curious. Could it be that she had found out about Ginny's stock acquisition? As for the small villain Obadiah, Charles had long forgotten about him, as he still held the first-generation prototype. Answering the call, he heard Pepper Potts's voice. "Mr. Charles, something seems to have happened on Tony's side." The call connected, but there was no sound and it was hung up. "I hope you can help me take a look. If something unexpected happens on Tony's side, please help me protect him. As for the price, we can discuss everything later. I'll compensate you with a mission commission after the matter is resolved. Please, I'm begging you." Pepper Potts had learned a bit about Charles Doyle's strength, which made her ultimately choose to ask for his help rather than Tony's other friend, Colonel Rhodes, from the military. Meanwhile, Agent Coulson, leading a small team, was surprised to hear that Pepper Potts had contacted Charles Doyle. He couldn't help but wonder if their relationship had become so close after just 1 or 2 missions. Why was she now reaching out to that man? Perhaps Pepper Potts had also gained some understanding of this man's secrets? It seemed that it would be necessary to find some time to talk to him. On the other end, in the training room, Charles understood the urgency in the other's words and immediately agreed to help. Okay, I'll rush over to take a look. Trust me, Tony will be fine. As for the matter of the commission and reward, we'll discuss it after the situation is resolved. Hanging up the phone, Pepper Potts said to Coulson beside her, I know a shortcut. Come with me. Hanging up the phone, Charles didn't hesitate, this was a golden opportunity for him. He always liked to do these effortless favors. It seems my smart butler will soon be available. Thanks to this life-saving favor, I believe Tony won't refuse me this time. Without further ado, Charles intended to rush to Tony's house before he regained consciousness. Since the big event marking the start of the Marvel Universe was about to unfold, Charles didn't intend to continue hiding. 8 gates, gate of rest, open. Charles transformed into a green lightning bolt, speeding at supersonic pace towards Tony's mansion. Fortunately, it was nighttime, and with Charles racing on the rooftop, coupled with the terrifying speed, there were barely any witnesses. Otherwise, if some comic book fans saw him, they might have thought that the Green Lantern had stumbled onto the wrong set. At this moment, Tony lay stiff on the sofa, staring at the ceiling above, never expecting that his beloved uncle would be the one to eventually harm him. Even his previous kidnapping was orchestrated by the same person. This time, the culprit had taken away the reactor from his chest, which was absolutely devastating. Tony hadn't given up yet, he was waiting for the paralysis to wear off. That thing was his design, after all. He knew the duration of its paralysis. Seconds ticked away. At this time, Charles Doyle had already rushed to Tony's mansion with all his might. Since he didn't have a key and wasn't considered an automatic guest by JARVIS, he didn't hesitate to kick down the front door and barge into Tony's home. Charles was startled when he saw Tony lying lifelessly on the sofa in the hall. The next instant, Charles appeared in front of Tony. Observing the pale-faced Tony, who had a hollow space in his chest but was still breathing, Charles felt a pang of shock. Was he gone? In the next moment, Charles carefully examined Tony, who had bulging veins on his forehead, indicating that the paralysis duration hadn't yet passed. Tony, although unable to speak at the moment, expressed his gratitude through his eyes. He knew that if he didn't reinstall the reactor within the designated time, he would be a goner. However, due to the remaining effects of the paralysis, he couldn't do anything. Seeing Tony motionless, Charles didn't hesitate and swiftly rushed to Tony's laboratory below. In the laboratory, Charles wanted to find the previous reactor that Tony had installed in Mark II for him, but all he could see were various parts on the table, with no indication of where Tony had placed it. Finally, he only found an older model in a transparent box on the table. Without hesitation, Charles picked it up and arrived at Tony's side. Taking out the old reactor from the box, Charles, with the image of Pepper replacing the reactor from the movie in mind, swiftly reinstalled it for Tony. As the reactor returned to its place, Tony's paralysis also came to an end. With a gasp, Tony finally regained consciousness. Are you okay, Tony? At this moment, Tony grabbed Charles's hand and said, Thank you for your help, Charles. You've saved my life again. It was Pepper Potts who contacted me, saying you were in trouble. Upon hearing that Charles Doyle was contacted by Pepper, Tony immediately asked, Where's Pepper? Is she okay? Charles pondered the original plot for a moment before responding, Perhaps? She might have went with the agents to capture Obadiah. Agents? Those things aren't reliable. Looks like we have to go help. Tony stood up straight away and headed downstairs to the lab to change into his suit. Charles Doyle, standing beside him, reminded, Tony, you have the old model in your chest. Change it to a new one. I remember when you tested it with me, there was a spare arc reactor. Startled by Charles's reminder, Tony exclaimed, Damn, I forgot about that. Tony walked to a nearby drawer and took out a new arc reactor, the one previously used by Charles while piloting Mark II. Although the energy inside hadn't been replenished, it was still much stronger than the old one. After replacing the old reactor with the new one, Tony immediately went to the mechanical platform and donned Mark III with the help of the mechanical arms. Thanks for the reminder, Charles. Do you want to put on Mark II and come with me? Charles smiled at this moment and thought to himself, having 2 Iron Men on the scene is enough. Tony, have you forgotten my speed? Let's see who gets to Stark Industries first. Upon hearing Charles's proposal for a race, Tony agreed, Okay, no problem. After suiting up and closing the armor, J.A.R.V.I.S.S voice sounded, "Sir, you only have 80% power. That's enough. Charles, let the race begin." Tony made a fairy-like flying gesture and dashed out of his building. Charles Doyle, on the other hand, activated his 8 gates, Gate of Rest once again. Transformed into a green lightning bolt, he raced away. On the other side, Pepper Potts arrived at the exhibit area of the large arc reactor with Coulson and several other agents. Pepper muttered, "Zone 16, it's right below this one." They made their way underground, only to be blocked by a door that Pepper Potts's keycard couldn't open. In the end, they had to resort to a physical explosion through Coulson's means to enter Zone 16 underground. Pepper Potts led the group in a search. At this time, Obadiah had already donned his ironmonger and spotted Pepper Potts. Upon seeing the situation, Pepper immediately ran outside. Meanwhile, several agents aimed their pistols at Obadiah's armor and opened fire. Bayou, bayou, bayou. However, the bullets from the pistols didn't cause any harm to Obadiah, not even leaving a scratch. Driving the ironmonger, Obadiah punched each agent, reducing them to pulps. Pepper Potts had already run out of Zone 16 and reached the outside of Stark Industries. At this moment, Tony's call came in, and Pepper Potts immediately answered. "Tony, are you okay?" "I'm fine, thanks for bringing Charles Doyle." "Tony, Obadiah, he's gone mad, I know. Listen, you need to leave immediately. Do you hear me? Get out of there right away." While Pepper Potts was talking on the Bluetooth headset, Obadiah broke through the ground in the ironmonger. "Where do you think you're going to run?" A synthesized mechanical voice rang out from the ironmonger's armor. Seeing the enormous figure in front of her, Pepper Potts let out a scream. "I don't need you anymore, my dear." The ironmonger raised an arm and aimed the machine gun at Pepper Potts, preparing to attack. "Stop!" Tony arrived first at maximum power and Mach 2 speed and immediately knocked the ironmonger out of the industrial park, onto the streets outside. Chapter 167, Battle. As Tony and Ironmonger arrived on the street, they immediately caused a series of car accidents and traffic jams. At this moment, a mother driving with her child stopped in front of the massive ironmonger and honked the horn frantically due to nervousness. Obadiah grabbed the woman's car and was about to smash it at Tony while shouting, "I like this armor." "Put them down," Tony yelled. "You're finished, Tony." Seeing the situation, Tony gave a direct order, "JARVIS, adjust to maximum power." Boom! A thick laser shot out from the chest of Mark III, directly sending Obadiah flying, and the car he had raised high also fell to the ground. Seeing this, Tony opened his arms and caught the front of the car, preparing to set it down gently. "Sir, you have 60% of the energy left." The powerful blow just now had consumed nearly 20% of Tony's energy. The woman in the car, frightened by the experience, screamed uncontrollably. Tony knelt down. Just as he was about to set down the caught car, and hadn't moved away yet, the startled woman driver stepped on the accelerator. As soon as the car's rear wheels touched the ground, it rushed out, pushing Tony ahead. "Wait!" Just as Tony was about to slide off the front of the car, Charles Doyle arrived in time. Whoosh! Charles appeared behind Tony in a flash, grabbed his shoulder, and with a burst of speed, moved Tony away from the car's position. "Tony, did you want to roll under the car chassis?" "Bro, thanks for the help, but I'm the winner of this speed contest." Tony hadn't forgotten their previous race and immediately declared his victory, making the current score 1:1. Charles didn't say much, as it was true that while he could reach supersonic speeds, he wasn't significantly faster than Tony. While Mark III could reach twice the speed of sound in terms of travel, and in the future, it could reach up to 8 times the speed of sound, that was Tony's maximum flight speed, not his attack speed. Charles, on the other hand, could integrate speed and attack, and the two's intuitive experience was different, especially in combat, where the difference was even more significant. After all, Tony's armor propulsion required an acceleration process, while Charles did not, and every move, every punch and kick, could reach supersonic levels. "Okay, you win this round. However, it seems a big guy has arrived here." It was Obadiah driving the ironmonger, jetting flames under his feet, leaping over to them. Seeing the extra person in front of him, Obadiah recognized Charles immediately and said, "I know you, Charles Doyle. It was you who rescued Tony from the cave." At that moment, a motorcyclist happened to ride past Obadiah, who grabbed the rear wheel, using the motorcycle as a weapon. Boom! The motorcycle collided with Tony's armor. The collision created a substantial explosion that sent Tony flying out. But today, you don't have the ability to rescue Tony again, Obadiah added. After speaking, Obadiah didn't look at Charles but instead jumped to Tony's side to continue the attack. Evidently, in Obadiah's eyes, Charles, being a mere mortal, was just a nobody. After dealing with Tony, he could easily take care of Charles. Feeling ignored, Charles touched his nose. Were they really disregarding him? At this moment, countless panicked crowds on the street were all in a frenzy, running away from the paralyzed cars to avoid the chaos. Some daring individuals, however, took out their phones and started filming the Ironmonger and Mark III, but they treated Charles like just another bystander. As Obadiah rushed over and saw that Tony hadn't gotten up yet, he delivered a swift kick, sending Tony crashing into a nearby bus. He then grabbed Tony. For many years, I have supported you. He threw Tony to the ground, controlling Ironmonger to stomp on Tony fiercely. I built this company from scratch, and I won't allow anyone to stop me, including you. He grabbed Tony once again and threw him with force, causing a bus in front of him to split into two and fired a missile. Boom! The explosion sent Tony flying into the air and then crashing back down to the ground. At that moment, Tony stabilized himself and shouted, "Charles, are you just watching? Lend a hand. His armor is too large and solid." Hearing Tony asking for Charles's help, Obadiah laughed, "Tony, are you foolish? What can this mere mortal do?" As he spoke, Obadiah extended his arm, aiming with his left arm, which carried 12 missiles, at Tony Stark in the air. Charles turned his neck and shouted, "I thought you could handle it yourself." Shooting star strike. Charles appeared in front of Ironmonger in an instant and delivered a flying kick, sending the massive figure flying. In mid-air, Charles launched a series of attacks and then delivered a powerful punch, slamming the opponent to the ground. Boom! As Ironmonger fell, it flattened a car and left several dents on its armor. "Tony, this guy is really heavy, probably about 20 tons. Obadiah, who was knocked down, quickly grabbed the flattened car and hurled it toward Charles Doyle. Facing the incoming car, Charles kicked it to the side. "Enhanced human? Super soldier serum. I don't care what you are, as long as you're in the way, you have to die." Obadiah, under Charles's attack, momentarily confused, shot out all the missiles on his right arm. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 12 missiles split into two directions, with 6 aimed at Tony Stark floating in the air and the other 6 at Charles Doyle on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. As the distance was too close, Tony couldn't dodge in time and was directly hit by the missiles. The huge explosion sent Tony flying in the direction of Pepper Potts. Seeing Tony tumbling, Pepper quickly ran up and shouted, "Tony, Tony, are you okay?" As for the missiles aimed at Charles, they lost their target the moment they came into contact with him and exploded on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the 6 missiles should not be underestimated, as they directly blew a deep pit in the ground, sending sand and stones flying in all directions. Chapter 168, Shattering. Charles knew that these missiles were all equipped with tracking and targeting functions. He immediately used the shadow clone jutsu to deceive the missiles, and then accelerated to appear behind Obadiah. At this moment, Obadiah chuckled, "Tony, I really love this armor of yours. So what if he is enhanced? He is still going to die. Is that so?" Charles snorted coldly. "Wooden leaf gale." Charles delivered a powerful and heavy kick directly to Ironmonger's head. Boom! With a tremendous impact, Ironmonger was sent flying by Charles, smashing several cars along the way. Seeing that his kick didn't directly dislocate the opponent's head, Charles felt somewhat disappointed. However, considering the massive size of the armor, he knew the materials used were much thicker than Tony's. Indeed, the thickness of the materials determined the defense. Not giving Obadiah any chance to react, Charles accelerated directly, his figure resembling a bolt of lightning, instantly appearing beside Obadiah. Infinite Chaotic Dance. Considering the thickness of Ironmonger's armor, Charles launched 11 consecutive Infinite Chaotic Dance strikes, all aimed at the opponent's head. Clang, 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 boom. Charles's attack speed already surpassed the speed of sound, coupled with the wild chakra endowed by the Gate of Pain. Each strike caused Ironmonger's head to dent, As for the final charged strike, it created a massive sonic boom, shattering all the surrounding car windows. Ironmonger's head was directly blown up by this strike. Swift as lightning, Charles's infinite chaotic dance was completed in an instant, taking even less than a second. Tony, who was blown to Pepper Potts' side, hadn't even managed to get up before the battle ended. With Ironmonger taken care of, Charles flickered and instantly appeared next to Tony. Seeing Charles with bulging veins on his forehead, Pepper Potts felt somewhat nervous but grateful. She spoke, "Thank you, Mr. Charles. You saved me and Tony once again." Charles waved his hand, then spoke to Tony, who was still somewhat dazed from the missile explosion. He found it somewhat unbelievable that Charles had already finished the fight. Although Obadiah's armor was unsightly, the material used was indeed sturdy, and its defense was extraordinary. Yet, it was defeated so quickly. Without dwelling on it, Tony opened his helmet and revealed his face, then said, "Thank you, Charles. Leave the aftermath to me." After hearing Tony's agreement, Charles didn't linger any longer. He glanced at Coulson, who was hiding on the side, then disappeared in a flash without a trace. Coulson, who was hiding on the side, met Charles's gaze. His pupils suddenly contracted, and he adjusted his danger level for Charles to the highest in his mind. Tony approached Ironmonger's side, looking at the headless giant armor. He shrank his neck and thought to himself, "I hope that in the next sparring session, he'll go easy on me. If it were a life or death duel, I'd be instantly obliterated by Charles. Thank goodness we're friends." Then Tony rubbed his chin, realizing that the armor upgrade was indeed urgent. At least, he needed to withstand Charles's punches. On the other side, back at the agency, Charles had washed up and lay down on the bed. He didn't immediately fall asleep but instead reminisced about today's battle. Thinking about his ninjutsu, Charles furrowed his brows, feeling that he was still too weak. Currently, his most potent attacks were the taijutsu of Rock Lee and the 8 inner gates. As for the other ninjutsu, the fireball jutsu, it was clear that with his current abilities, he couldn't melt adamantium alloy. As for Chidori, it might be more effective against others, with enough piercing power. However, against Iron Man, Charles suspected he would end up like Thor, becoming the opponent's power source. Thinking that Iron Man had already emerged, the arrival of the Hulk was not far off. With Tony's admission of being Iron Man tomorrow, various significant events were on the horizon. Charles felt a sense of urgency. Considering the ninjas he currently possessed, he was planning to sell some information to Coulson in exchange for some energy blocks. To summon Tsunade as soon as possible would not only add another caretaker but also provide monstrous strength. With the 8 inner gates, he would be able to cause earthquakes with every move. Even if the Hulk came, he would dare to engage in a brawl. But whether he could defeat him, only a confrontation would tell. Thinking about today's battle, he hoped Coulson would be a bit sensible and come over soon. No longer pondering these matters, Charles closed his eyes and fell asleep. The next day. Ding! Checked in, received 200 samsara stones. Seeing this, Charles silently stored it in his storage space. Entering the hall, Charles saw that it was Shizun standing at the service desk, which surprised him. He asked, "Did Irika leave the work to you when he departed?" "Yes, Lord Charles. I've been filling in for Irika's work these past few days," Shizun respectfully replied. "I appreciate your efforts, Shizun. In terms of medical knowledge and the differences in human anatomy, how is your learning going?" Charles inquired about medical ninjutsu-related knowledge. Upon hearing Charles's question, Shizun immediately responded, "In terms of medical knowledge, many aspects are similar. As for human anatomy, I've already discerned the differences using the injured and deceased in the Continental Hotel. However, in some aspects like nutrient solutions, therapeutic agents, and other things that require herbs, I haven't completed the substitution and screening of materials. After all, the differences in herbs between the two places are incredibly significant." Hearing Shizun's words, Charles nodded. "Regarding the substitution of herbs, have Ginny purchase all the herbs and then try and compare each one. See which ones can be substituted and which ones cannot be found at all. If they can't be replaced and can't be developed, temporarily abandon them." Thinking about the complexity of this planet, Charles knew that the effectiveness of the herbs here might not be much worse, but they were just hard to find. "Yes, Lord Charles." Seeing the respectful Shizun, Charles smiled and said, "Shizun, you don't have to be so respectful all the time. We are all comrades. Have you eaten? Would you like to join me? Upon hearing Charles's words about being comrades, a smile appeared on Shizuan's face. She then replied, I've already eaten, so I won't accompany you. Chapter 169, I Am Iron Man. Upon hearing that Shizuan had already eaten, Charles didn't extend the invitation further and instead walked to the dining area to have the staff prepare breakfast for him. While having breakfast, Charles looked at the TV hanging on the wall. COL. James Rhodey Rhodes was giving the official report of the previous night's events. According to unconfirmed reports, a prototype robot malfunctioned, causing significant damage. Fortunately, one of Tony Stark's private bodyguards used Stark's top-secret technology to resolve the situation. Watching the Colonel on TV discussing the matter, Charles took a bite of his sandwich but paid no attention to what Rhodes was saying. He was waiting for Tony's appearance. In the backstage room of the press conference, Pepper Potts was touching up Tony's makeup. Tony looked at the newspaper and chuckled, Iron Man, that's an interesting name. Looking at the picture of himself in the Mark III armor on the street, he remarked, I do look pretty handsome. But how come there's no mention of Charles Doyle in the report? Didn't they capture it? Tony curiously asked. Coulson, who had walked over at this moment, spoke, his speed was too fast at the time. From the beginning of the fight to the end, not even 2 seconds had passed. Perhaps no passers-by managed to capture it. That's your alibi, Tony. All right. As Coulson handed over the note to Tony, he continued, at the time, you were on the yacht. The Port Authority confirms that you were docked at Avalon Harbor all night, with testimony from 50 guests. Tony looked at the item in his hand and then said, it's more accurate to say that only Pepper and I were on the island that night. Coulson said expressionlessly, we can't fake that information. Just read it as instructed. Upon hearing Coulson's words, Tony raised an eyebrow. We can't fake? Are you serious? After confirming the content in his hand, Tony was surprised, no mention of Obadiah. We took care of it. He went on vacation. You know, small planes are not always safe. But how do we explain the fabricated bodyguard? He is me. How do we explain this weak link? What about Charles Doyle? In fact, he defeated Obadiah. Although I was confident that I could beat him, you know, Charles's power was stronger and he resolved the issue faster. Coulson didn't directly answer Tony's question but said, you know, we've done this kind of thing before. As long as you follow the official statement, everything will be fine. You only have 90 seconds. With that, Coulson turned and left directly. As Coulson walked away, Pepper Potts hurried a few steps to catch up and immediately expressed her gratitude, Agent Coulson, I sincerely thank you for all the help you've provided. I deeply appreciate it. Coulson smiled, it's what I should do. There will be more cooperation in the future. Pepper Potts thought for a moment and said, your Homeland Strategic Defense Attack A&D. Hearing the somewhat stumbling name, Coulson interrupted, we're now called S.H.I.E.L.D. That's great, that name sounds good. After a smile, Coulson turned and left. Seeing Coulson's departure, Pepper Potts picked up her suit from the sofa and said, it's your turn, Tony. Tony, holding the cue cards, walked over and said, it seems that falsifying information isn't that difficult, although I can't believe I'm Iron Man. Pepper Potts helped Tony put on his suit and said, of course, you're not Iron Man. I am. Okay, it's up to you. At the press conference, Rhodey announced, next, Mr. Stark has prepared a statement, but he won't be answering any questions. Thank you. At this point, Tony stepped onto the podium and looked at the reporters below. I've been out of the limelight for a while, so I'll just read from the script. At this moment, Charles leaned back in his chair, watching Tony Stark appear on TV with a smile on his face. Some people have speculated that I was personally involved in the incidents that occurred on Expressway and in the industrial park. At this moment, a journalist familiar to Tony interrupted, I'm sorry, Mr. Stark. Do you really think we'll believe that a bodyguard conveniently appeared in armor when the truth is usually? Tony stared at this beautiful journalist who had a history with him and said with a smile, I know what you mean. Questioning the official version is always necessary. But it shouldn't be baseless speculation, calling me some kind of superhero for no reason. Christine immediately raised her hand and said, I didn't say you're a superhero. You didn't. That's good. It would be absurd if it were that way. It would be too outrageous. I'm not cut out to be a superhero. Clearly, I have too many character flaws and have done too many wrong things, which would set a bad example. Seeing Tony getting a little off topic, Rhodey hurriedly reminded him, just read from the script and don't say anything else. Tony took the script and looked at the content. In fact, Tony paused for a moment, put down the script in his hand, and said, I am Iron Man. Upon hearing Tony's response, the venue erupted into a commotion. Are you serious? Did you just say you're Iron Man? Mr. Stark, why did you admit it? How did you create that armor? At this point, countless reporters were asking Tony about the armor, the Ironmonger, and other questions. However, Christine stood up and said loudly, Mr. Tony. According to the latest information I've received, it wasn't you who dealt with that giant robot, right? With Christine's words, the venue instantly fell silent. Numerous media people looked at Christine, who was sitting in the front row. After all, this news was also explosive, although not as big as Tony being Iron Man. In the middle of speaking, Christine even produced a photo and continued, Mr. Tony, according to an eyewitness at the scene, it was a person not wearing any armor, the person in this photo, who defeated the giant robot, is that correct? In a corner of the press conference venue, Coulson slapped his forehead, feeling frustrated. Damn it, there really was an eyewitness who took a photo. Chapter 170, Like-Minded Friends. The members of the investigation team said no one captured Charles Doyle on camera, right? Coulson said, massaging his forehead in confusion. Tony took a few steps forward, looking at the photo in Christine's hand. Can I take a look at the picture? Christine didn't refuse and handed the photo to Tony. Tony took the photo, returned to the podium, and looked at the figure in the picture. Despite some blurriness and distortion, he could still easily recognize Charles Doyle. Tony looked at the media below and then spoke, I am Iron Man, a superhero. It's very reasonable to have a like-minded friend who shares the same ideals. He was the support I called and together we dealt with the villain. Tony pondered for a moment, the villain, Ironmonger. But my friend hasn't thought of a flashy nickname yet. Maybe he'll tell everyone next time. After speaking, Tony didn't stay at the scene and turned to leave. Meanwhile, watching the live news broadcast, Charles Doyle was somewhat surprised. Have I been exposed? Like-minded friends, hey. I wonder if I'll also be called a superhero. However, Charles had long prepared himself for being discovered this time. After all, once Tony admitted he was Iron Man, all sorts of supernatural beings began to appear one after another. By then, people would find it increasingly easier to accept the existence of these superhumans, and as for public opinion, it wasn't important to Charles. Not dwelling on these matters, Charles enjoyed his breakfast happily. Just after finishing breakfast, not even 2 minutes had passed when Charles's phone rang. Charles, it seems your actions yesterday have also been exposed. Why don't you organize a press conference and come up with a name for yourself? Tony's voice came from the other end of the line. Hearing Tony's words, Charles smiled and replied, Tony, if it's already exposed, there's no need to hold an additional press conference. On the other end, Tony asked, okay, but what about a nickname? Are you going to continue using your previous titles like Ninja or Master of Ninjutsu? After considering for a moment, Charles replied, Ninja Deity. Ninja Deity. Tony pondered for a moment and then laughed. Very ambitious. Aren't you afraid those old guys from your place will come and beat you up after hearing this nickname? I remember you said you couldn't even rank among them. Hearing Tony remember what he said after their last sparring match, Charles raised an eyebrow and continued, I'll go with this nickname. I believe I can live up to it. Okay. After a few more words, Tony hung up the phone. As the press conference ended, the stock of Stark Industries instantly stopped its decline and miraculously began to rise. Of course, it wasn't because Tony had become a superhero that the stock was rising. It was because of the technology of Tony's battle armor, which was both Iron Man and Ironmonger gave countless investors a new hope. The crowds who saw the news immediately poured their money into Stark Industries, and Wall Street immediately raised the rating of Stark Industries. Clearly, everyone's eyes were wide open. They saw a new weapon of war, the combat robot. Meanwhile, not long after Charles hung up with Tony, Ginny's call also came in. Boss, Stark Industries will hold a board meeting in 3 days. You need to attend, Ginny informed. In addition, we have the groundbreaking ceremony for the organization's base, the orphanage construction ceremony, and the establishment of the charity fund, all of which require your attendance." Feeling a bit overwhelmed by the upcoming schedule, Charles still responded, "I will make time for it. You can make the specific arrangements then. And as for the base construction, you need to speed it up. I don't want to wait too long. We will accelerate the construction speed of the base, but no matter how fast it is, the construction will still take some time. After all, the area is not small," Ginny assured. Considering the area of the new base, Charles knew it would indeed take some time. He emphasized, "Just do it as soon as possible." Meanwhile, at the backstage of the press conference, Tony didn't immediately leave but returned to the backstage room. He knew that if he went out, he would be mobbed by the press. Pepper Potts looked at her boss and spoke, "Tony, when I asked Charles for help yesterday, I promised to give him another commission after it was over. How much would be appropriate for this commission? Last time, we gave $100 million for the rescue." Obviously, Pepper Potts hadn't forgotten what she promised when she sought Charles's help yesterday. Tony rubbed his forehead and suggested, "Let's not give actual money for the commission. You go and find Charles and tell him it's an artificial intelligence system, along with the full set of equipment required to operate the AI system. But you have to tell him to find a good place to store the equipment because a complete set of equipment for an AI isn't something that can be handled with just a USB drive or a large hard drive. It needs a whole building to house the hardware." Shocked at Tony's decision to gift an entire artificial intelligence system, Pepper was surprised. After all, this wasn't something that could be bought with a few $100 million. The equipment needed to run an artificial intelligence system alone, not counting the AI itself, was not something $100 million could cover. "Tony, isn't it too expensive?" Despite Pepper's advice, Tony told her about what happened in the villa. Hearing Tony's account, Pepper exclaimed, "Oh my, that was indeed too dangerous." Luckily, Charles arrived just in time. "Tony, your decision is right. If the other party wants an AI, then let's give it to him. Charles is a trustworthy person." Tony had a smile on his face and proudly said, "My friends, like me, are all reliable." "All right, Pepper, you can leave now. Take this good news to Charles. By the time you leave, most of the reporters will be attracted away." Upon hearing Tony's instructions, Pepper straightened her clothes and said, "Okay, I'll help you divert the reporters." Chapter 171, Elevating the Task Level. After ending the call with Ginny, Charles Doyle didn't engage in other matters. Instead, he brought out a laptop and started browsing eBay, the largest second-hand trading website in the United States. This had become a new pastime for Charles. He wanted to see if there was anything interesting there. Although Charles had seen several second-hand glasses, he hadn't found Sam Witwicky selling any. If Transformers also made their way to this world, Charles wouldn't mind having one more rechargeable item. After all, although the Allspark was not as powerful as the Infinity Stones, the energy stored inside was probably much more than that of any earthly machine. However, after a fruitless search, Charles didn't find Sam, unsure if it was because the person wasn't in this universe or due to a different username used for selling. Fortunately, Charles hadn't held out much hope. It was just an experimental idea. If Sam had really been integrated into this universe, he could be found later. But the intensity of the battle between the two sides wasn't something to take lightly. While Charles was browsing the online listings for second-hand goods, someone walked into Charles's office. Pepper Potts arrived at the office with Tony's bodyguard, Happy, and diverted some of the reporters when they left. However, seeing only Pepper Potts in the car, the reporters didn't follow up. As the doorman opened the door to the office, Happy and Pepper Potts walked in. They made their way to the front desk, where the receptionist had changed to an Asian American woman, but Pepper Potts didn't mind. "Hello, I am Pepper Potts. I had an appointment with Mr. Charles yesterday to discuss a commissioned task." Upon hearing that the appointment was with Mr. Charles, the receptionist didn't neglect them and immediately said, "Ma'am, please wait in the guest room." A waiter then escorted Pepper Potts and Happy to the guest room. At the same time, the receptionist picked up the phone at the front desk and made a call. "Mr. Charles, a lady named Pepper Potts, who had an appointment with you, has come to discuss a commissioned task. The person has already gone to the guest room." "Understood, thank you." Sitting in the guest room, Pepper Potts was curious. "Happy, why has the office changed its location?" I remember that it wasn't in this position the last time I came. Sitting on the sofa, Happy took a sip of water and replied, it seems like they are rebuilding over there, just next door. But it has been a month, and it's still not finished. As the two chatted, the door of the guest room opened, and Charles Doyle walked in. Hi, Pepper Potts, Happy, long time no see. Long time no see, Mr. Charles. Happy, as the bodyguard, quickly stood up and greeted him. Mr. Charles, thank you so much for your help yesterday. You saved Tony and me. I sincerely thank you for that, said Pepper Potts. The contribution you made was exceptional, Pepper Potts said, looking earnestly at Charles. Charles smiled in response, you don't have to be so polite. Didn't Tony say that we are like-minded friends? But the fee for the commission task still shouldn't be overlooked, Charles added. Pepper Potts smiled at Charles's response. Mr. Charles, I came today to discuss the commission with you. How do you think we should handle this commission? The mission has already ended, and on my end. Hearing Pepper Potts' words, Charles considered it. Indeed, the mission had been completed, but out of curiosity, he took out a task scroll, hoping to see if the mission level could be elevated. The commission task, to protect Tony Stark's life on August 24, 2008, and eliminate the enemies Ironmonger and the pilot, Obadiah. Charles detailed everything that had happened yesterday, particularly about Tony Stark and his enemy Obadiah. On one hand, it was to provide a more comprehensive mission description, and on the other, it was to see if the mission level could be upgraded. After all, using the new arc reactor core and piloting the Ironmonger, such a massive mech, the mission level should be at least B, if not A. Charles glanced at Pepper Potts and asked, how much is the commission fee? Pepper Potts pondered for a moment before replying, Mr. Charles, Tony mentioned that the commission fee would be an artificial intelligence system, along with the necessary operational equipment. He also asked me to convey to you to prepare a place to store the equipment, requiring at least the size of a building. Your office might not be enough to accommodate the equipment. Furthermore, regarding this artificial intelligence system, do you have any specific requirements for the core commands? Upon hearing Pepper Potts' words, Charles was momentarily taken aback. He had considered mentioning the idea of an intelligent system to Tony when they met, hoping for one as a commission fee. He had thought Tony might give him one someday, but he didn't expect Tony to be so generous, not only providing an artificial intelligence system but also all the accompanying equipment. Charles was well aware of the prices for the accompanying equipment when considering an artificial intelligence system. To put it bluntly, even a basic system with supporting equipment would cost over $100 million. And if it were to develop and upgrade the system further, with stronger emotions and anthropomorphism, like JARVIS, the cost would be astronomical, possibly reaching $500 million. Charles knew that he had hit the jackpot with this commission and that Tony was truly a great friend. I understand. I will discuss the specific details with Tony over the phone, Charles said as he filled in the details of the commission fee. He then handed the scroll to Pepper Potts. Taking the scroll, Pepper Potts quickly scanned it. Finding no issues, she signed her name on it. Mr. Charles, once you have the address ready for receiving, you can directly contact Tony or me. We will come with the necessary manpower to set up the control room for you. If there's nothing else, we will take our leave now. After finalizing the commission and discussing the commission fee, Pepper Potts prepared to leave. As Tony Stark's secretary at Stark Industries, she was the busiest person after Obadiah's death. She had to prepare for the board meeting scheduled in 3 days. Chapter 172, A-Level Mission. Upon Pepper Potts and Happy's departure, Charles tossed the task scroll directly into the task collection room. Ding! System Judgment. The system judgment this time was notably lengthy, surpassing Charles's expectations. Just when he thought the mission might fail to be submitted, the system prompt came through. Ding! System judgment successful. It was an A-level task, rewarding 5,000 reputation points, 500,000 copper coins, and 1 exquisite treasure chest. Upon hearing that the task not only succeeded but was also classified as an A-level mission, a smile spread across Charles's face. He had earned a substantial amount, a big win indeed. At the same time, Charles knew he could submit the mission later, just like in the Naruto world, where tasks were subject to mission level determination and reward distribution afterward in several cases. Most importantly, Ironmonger had been classified as an A-level task, indicating that this mission involved extraordinary circumstances, akin to the appearance of a ninja or even a jounin in the Naruto world. Upon submission, the task instantly transitioned into a completed state. Without hesitation, Charles directly claimed the rewards. Ding! Task completed, reward, 5,000 reputation points, 500,000 copper coins, and 1 exquisite treasure chest. With all the rewards in hand, Charles's reputation points were no longer at 0, finally reaching 5,000. He was very satisfied with this outcome. On the other side, in the Triskelion building, in Nick Fury's office, Coulson, take the energy blocks with you and go directly to Charles's agency as per our previous plan to obtain information. Charles's level of danger is even higher than we initially thought. He was able to destroy Obadiah's armor with just his body, which is much stronger than the super soldier serum. As for Tony Stark, I will go and communicate with him. Understood. I will go to Charles's agency for the Intelligence Commission shortly. I should be able to receive new information quickly if this Intelligence Commission is not rejected by the other party. I will try to delve deeper into the questions if possible. Nick Fury glanced at Coulson. I trust you. Coulson said nothing more and left the director's office. He arrived at the warehouse with the S.H.I.E.L.D team and took 4 crates of energy blocks, a total of 60 pieces. Under the escort of the S.H.I.E.L.D team, he then proceeded to Charles's agency. After claiming the task rewards, Charles took out his phone and dialed Tony's number directly. On the other end, Tony Stark, who was currently chatting with Rhodey, saw Charles's call and immediately answered it without hesitation. Hey, Tony. I love the idea of the artificial intelligence system. Your generosity is truly impressive. Tony had a smile on his face as he held a glass of whiskey. We are friends, aren't we? Besides, my life shouldn't be more valuable than this thing, so don't thank me too much. If you really want to show gratitude, bring Aoda and Parker to visit me when you have the time. Rhodey was somewhat surprised. Aoda and Parker? Who were they? Were they the newly elected Miss Beautiful somewhere, or the cover girls for some magazine, to make Tony remember them so fondly? Okay, the next time we meet, I will bring them to see you. In terms of the artificial intelligence, just program it with J.A.R.V.I.SS personality. What I need is an intelligent butler and assistant, with the primary logic setting always loyal to and never betraying Charles Doyle. Make this logic the primary one, and let all other logic settings follow this one. Tony was slightly taken aback by Charles's request. Dude, what are you afraid of? The AI is our trusted companion and won't betray us. But since it's your request, I will include it. However, this may slow down the growth of your AI system. Charles didn't mind the slow progress. He didn't want to trigger an AI crisis, after all. He knew well that Tony had issues in the future with his settings, leading to the creation of Ultron, who wanted to destroy the world. As for warning Tony now, Charles immediately rejected the idea. It was too absurd, and Tony wouldn't believe it. It's fine for the growth to be slow. Safety first. Tony, I'm building a base. Do you have any special requirements for the construction of the server room? Tony became interested upon hearing about Charles's plan to build a base. Charles, just have your secretary coordinate with mine for the server room. But after the base is built, remember to call me to come and visit. Okay, I'll have Ginny contact Pepper Potts when the base is ready. I'll have you over. After a brief conversation, they hung up. Observing Tony's casual communication, Rhodey was somewhat puzzled. After all, he knew almost all of Tony's friends. Is this the friend you're in tune with? Tony smiled. I'll introduce you when there's a chance. He's a cool friend. Rhodey appeared thoughtful but then smiled. Great, I love making friends. On the other side, Coulson and a team of agents arrived outside Charles's agency. After getting out of the car, Coulson instructed, you guys guard the stuff outside. When you receive my signal, come in with the boxes. Walking to the entrance of Charles's agency, Coulson entered the building after the doorman opened the door. Passing through the lobby and corridors, he arrived at the reception desk, surprised to see Jonan Shizun on duty here. Was she being isolated, or was this a shift system, or was this position particularly important? After introducing himself, Coulson stated, Hello, I am Coulson. I need to find Mr. Charles Doyle for an intelligence commission. Chapter 173, Coulson's Commission, Bonus Chapter. Please wait in the reception room, I will inform the boss, said Shizuan, leading Carlson into the room. Dialing Charles's number, Shizuan informed him of Carlson's arrival for an intelligence mission commission. Lord Charles, Carlson is here for an intelligence task commission. He is currently in the reception room. Yes, alone, and I didn't see him carrying anything. Okay, understood. Knowing that Carlson's visit meant a delivery of chargeable items, Charles was wary of any attempt to defraud. He made it clear that nobody could evade payment, not even S.H.I.E.L.D. If necessary, he could use this opportunity for extortion. Without closing his laptop, Charles got up and headed towards the meeting room. Just as he was leaving, his cursor happened to glide over a sales page, and suddenly, information about a second-hand ring for sale popped up. The ring was a dragon-shaped ring, listed at a price of $100,000. Evidently, the seller was in a dilemma, torn between wanting to sell the ring that had troubled him since childhood and led to a diagnosis of a mental disorder. Harboring suspicions that the experiences were not mere illusions, he had set an extremely high price. There were quite a few comments on the sales interface, all mocking the seller for being money-hungry. Some even joked that the same ring was available for $10 each, with bulk discounts. However, this pop-up window went unnoticed by Charles as he left. Upon arriving at the meeting room, Charles walked straight to the sofa opposite Carlson and sat down. He then spoke up. I anticipated that you would come, but it took longer than I expected. Charles didn't bother with pleasantries, pulling out a blank task scroll and spreading it out on the table. So, what kind of intelligence mission do we have today? As I mentioned last time, the prices will no longer be discounted and will return to the original rates. Seeing Charles Doyle get straight to the point, Carlson composed himself before speaking. First of all, I want to express my sincere gratitude, Mr. Charles, for your feat yesterday. You resolved the turmoil caused by Ironmonger and successfully killed him. Amused by Carlson's formalities, Charles chuckled, Oh, is the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division planning to award me a Good Citizen Medal, or maybe a stabilizing reward? Carlson maintained a professional smile and replied, If Mr. Charles is interested, we can arrange it quickly and hold a press conference to commend you. However, Carlson's words were not merely casual. If Charles was enticed by the idea of becoming a public figure, they had plenty of ways to control him. After all, turning him into a superhero would allow them to easily apply pressure and control through morality, responsibility and other means. Nevertheless, Carlson's proposal held no appeal for Charles, who waved it off, saying, This is just a task, I won't take extra pay, Carlson. You need to understand, rules are important here. Upon hearing Charles's refusal, Carlson merely smiled and didn't dwell on the topic. After all, this was just an attempt. Besides, he was also aware of Pepper Potts' task request, having been present during the phone communication. Well then, Mr. Charles, shall we proceed with the intelligence task? Carlson asked. Hearing Carlson's question, Charles smiled and responded, Sure, why not? You go ahead and tell me the specific intelligence you want to obtain. Mr. Charles, as you mentioned before, the establishment of the Hidden Leaf Village was led by two clans. I want to obtain information about both of these clans, Carlson replied. Upon hearing Carlson's request, Charles's face lit up with a smile. No problem. I can provide you with information on both clans, but the prices will vary depending on the level of detail, Charles said. For basic information on one clan, it will cost 5 energy blocks. For slightly detailed information, it's 20 energy blocks. For the detailed development details after the village's establishment, it's 50 energy blocks. However, Charles didn't mention anything about the family's historical details or its evolution, considering the high prices and the potential reluctance to accept such a large number of energy blocks. Carlson was taken aback by Charles's increased prices and the various versions of the information, especially the price of 50 energy blocks for the family's post-village establishment development, given that Carlson had only brought 60 blocks. It seemed that the plan needed some adjustments. Mr. Charles, let's start with a brief version of the family's information, Carlson suggested, intending to see what information the 5 energy block intelligence contained. Charles quickly wrote the information on the task scroll and handed it to Carlson for confirmation. After Carlson signed, Charles retrieved the scroll and submitted the task commission to the mission assembly, receiving a B-level task directly. Mr. Charles, I'll send the commission fee to you later, Carlson said. Charles smiled and continued, the establishment of the Hidden Leaf Village was primarily led by two major ninja families. One of these families is called the Uchiha, and the current leader is Uchiha Madara. The Uchiha family is a powerful clan in the ninja world and one of the two largest clans among ninjas. The Uchiha family crest is a gunbei with red and white color. Every member of the Uchiha clan possesses great potential and is considered outstanding among their peers. Upon Charles's introduction, Coulson immediately caught on and asked, "Is Uchiha Sasuke one of the members of this clan?" Chapter 174, Honest Operation. Charles nodded and smiled, "That's right. Just by the name, you can tell that Uchiha Sasuke is a member of the Uchiha clan. After all, no one dares to impersonate as a member of the Uchiha clan in the ninja world." Upon hearing Charles's words, Coulson nodded in agreement and continued to look at Charles, waiting for him to continue the explanation. However, Charles did not continue speaking. Coulson was a little taken aback and asked, "Is that all?" Charles smiled, "Yes, that's all the information for 5 energy blocks." Hearing that Charles had nothing more to add, Coulson didn't object. However, he seized several key points: the Uchiha clan, one of the most powerful clans among the ninjas, the current clan leader Uchiha Madara, and the clan emblem. Furthermore, one of the subordinates around Charles was a member of the Uchiha clan. These pieces of information needed verification and further discussed back at the bureau. "In that case, Mr. Charles, how about the information on the other clan?" After signing another commission, Charles informed Coulson about the existence of the Senju clan. Similar to the Uchiha clan, Charles explained the name of the contemporary leader of the Senju clan, Hashirama Senju. He also mentioned the Senju clan's position in the ninja world and the clan emblem's design. For this, Charles disclosed that Hashirama Senju was the first Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. After listening to the information about both clans, Coulson pondered for a moment. His expression turned somewhat grave, and then he said, "Mr. Charles, the next piece of information might be sensitive. You can choose not to accept the commission." Seeing Coulson looking so serious, Charles chuckled, "It's all right. You just need to commission the task as long as you can afford the remuneration." "Mr. Charles, is the ninja strength you possess inherent or gained through some kind of cultivation?" Coulson asked, wanting to know if Charles had become powerful step by step through the practice of some kind of cultivation techniques or if his strength was innate. This question was very important to S.H.I.E.L.D. Step-by-step cultivation implied that everyone had the potential for great power, even to the extent of becoming superhuman. If the power was obtained from birth, it would require consideration of reproduction, bloodline inheritance, and strategies targeted at both female and male individuals. Hearing Coulson's unexpected question, Charles immediately realized that the opportunity to raise the price had arrived. However, Charles didn't propose an exaggerated price, as the importance of this piece of information was relative. "It will be 30 energy blocks for this piece of information," he stated. Hearing the 30 energy blocks, Coulson breathed a sigh of relief. This price indicated that although the other party valued the information, it wasn't of a level that should remain undisclosed at all costs. Coulson always believed that Charles's knowledge was not comprehensive, and the tradable information was limited. After all, within S.H.I.E.L.D's internal analysis, Charles was merely an agent pushed to the forefront. "Okay, we'll go with the price you mentioned, 30 energy blocks, no problem." After signing the commission, Charles directly responded, "There are specific cultivation techniques, and strength is achieved step by step through practice." Of course, Charles's statement wasn't a lie. After all, even someone as powerful as Madara needed to cultivate step by step to grow. As for the so-called cultivation technique, Charles didn't mention it. Of course, if Coulson wanted to buy the name of this technique, Charles would tell him chakra extraction technique. However, Charles wasn't planning on revealing how to extract it without obtaining the ability to bestow chakra seeds on others. After all, a cultivation technique that couldn't be practiced was no different from a scam. Before obtaining the space gem, he planned to obtain energy blocks from the other party based on the principle of honest operation. Upon learning that the ninja's formidable strength was obtained through cultivation, Coulson's inner excitement immediately surged, but he forcibly suppressed it, maintaining a calm facade. "Mr. Charles, thank you for your information." Considering that he still had 20 energy blocks left, Coulson contemplated whether to use them to obtain information about Charles's condition that night or to acquire detailed information about the founding families. As for more sensitive topics, Coulson didn't intend to continue questioning. Information had to be obtained step by step, and he wouldn't directly commission information that was known to be impossible to gain. After a moment of thought, Carlson decided to postpone the commission for information on the founding ninja clans. On one hand, they had obtained the names of 2 clans, emblems, and the names of contemporary leaders, which could be verified and investigated one by one through the Bureau's intelligence. On the other hand, they were more interested in Charles's condition. Having made up his mind, Carlson took out several photos, some of which showed Charles running with the 8 gates opened, while others depicted him in combat with Ironmonger, with green chakra emanating from his body. "Mr. Charles, can you explain your condition and the green energy that appears on your body?" Upon seeing the photos Carlson presented, Charles glanced briefly, confirming what they were, and directly responded, "These are 2 questions related to strength, and each is worth 10 energy blocks." Seeing Charles raise the price again, Carlson opened his mouth, but eventually asked, "Sir, wasn't one piece of information valued at 5 energy blocks?" Charles repeated, "This information is related to strength and is very important. One piece is worth 10 energy blocks." Seeing Charles's determined gaze, Carlson pondered for a moment and said, "We'll go with your price." After signing 2 more scrolls, Carlson felt somewhat frustrated with Charles's set rules. Earlier, he had taken photos of the scrolls and sent them back to the Bureau for rune comparison and testing, confirming that the scrolls didn't possess any mysterious power. The patterns on them were merely decorative and not devilish clauses or anything of the sort. So, the fact that Charles had to sign a commission for every piece of information left him puzzled. Seeing Charles put away the commissions, Carlson couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Charles, can you tell me why you have to sign a commission for every piece of information?" Charles looked at Carlson's question and smiled, gesturing with his finger, "For 5 energy blocks, I'll tell you." Realizing that he had used up all his energy blocks, Carlson helplessly said, "Mr. Charles, I've used up all the energy blocks I brought. Can I give you these 5 blocks next time, and you can answer my question for now?" Chapter 175, Ninja Shop. "Then I'll wait for you to be ready next time to ask this question," Charles replied. Feeling somewhat helpless and frustrated at Charles's refusal, Carlson truly wished to capture this annoying fellow and interrogate him thoroughly to extract all the information. If it weren't for his consideration of the man's formidable abilities and the enigmatic Hidden Leaf village behind him, they would have done so already. Suppressing his frustration, Carlson maintained his professional smile and said, "In that case, please trouble Mr. Charles to provide the 2 pieces of information." Pointing to himself in one of the photos, Charles explained, "This state is a taijutsu technique of mine called the 8 gates. After using this technique, I enter this state, and my strength is enhanced in all aspects. As for the green energy you mentioned, it's called chakra. After activating the 8 gates, my body's chakra surges and materializes, which is the green energy in the photo." Listening to Charles's explanation, Carlson contemplated the term chakra and speculated that it was likely what ninjas practiced. "Thank you, Mr. Charles, for your response. That's all for today's information. As for the commission fee, I'll have it delivered to you right away." Carlson tapped the Bluetooth earpiece on his ear and instructed other agents to bring in the boxes. Within a minute, 2 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents entered with 4 briefcases, which they placed on the table under the guidance of the attendant. "Mr. Charles, all the commission fees are in the boxes, and the password is 0000. We won't disturb your work further and will take our leave." This time, Carlson didn't take the boxes with him and had changed the style of the briefcases, leaving them along with the energy blocks for Charles. Seeing the 4 briefcases on the table, Charles stood up, smiling and extending his hand, "Pleasure doing business with you. Looking forward to our next meeting." Carlson also shook hands with Charles, saying, "Pleasure doing business with you too. Oh, by the way, Mr. Charles, our organization has been renamed. It's now called S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing Carlson mention the name change, Charles couldn't help but think to himself, S.H.I.E.L.D, more like Snake Shield, right? But he maintained a smile on his face and replied, "It's a great name. Thank you." Carlson then bid farewell and left with his agents. Exiting the office building, Carlson got into his car and asked, "Has the tracking in the boxes been activated?" One of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in the car replied, "The tracking has all been activated, and signals are being transmitted in real time. We can monitor the movement of the boxes at any time." Carlson massaged his temples, then instructed, "Don't get your hopes up too high. It's just a simple probe. Drive back to the Triskelion. In the meeting room, with Coulson and the others gone, Charles didn't immediately recharge the energy blocks. Instead, he submitted the 4 mission scrolls to the mission assembly hall one by one. After a series of operations, Charles completed 4 B-rank missions. Because the information involved the Hidden Leaf Village but wasn't particularly special, they were only rated as B-rank missions. However, the rewards were still substantial. Including the initial submission, Coulson had Charles complete a total of 5 B-rank missions. Ding! Completed B-rank mission. Reward, 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and a regular treasure chest. Ding! Completed B-rank mission. Reward, 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and a regular treasure chest. Ding! Completed B-rank mission. Reward, 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and a regular treasure chest. Ding! Completed B-rank mission. Reward, 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and a regular treasure chest. Ding! Completed B-rank mission. Reward, 2,000 reputation, 200,000 copper coins, and a regular treasure chest. With these 5 consecutive reward notifications, Charles saw his reputation increase by 10,000, along with 1 million copper coins and 5 treasure chests. He also looked at the 60 energy blocks on the table. At that moment, Charles felt that Coulson's smile was pleasing and looked forward to their next meeting. After submitting the mission scrolls, Charles entered the password and opened all 4 briefcases, ignoring the system's prompt, and divided the 60 energy blocks into 2 piles. One pile contained 36 energy blocks, and the other contained 24. After dividing the energy blocks, Charles placed his hand on the pile of 36 energy blocks and proceeded with the recharge. Ding! Recharge successful. Received 6,480 plus 6,480 gold coins. With 6,480 gold coins recharged and his VIP level changing from VIP 3 to VIP 5, Charles suddenly had 13,960 more gold coins. The total gold coins surged to 14,264, the first time he had more than 10,000 gold coins. Seeing the amount recharged, Charles was excited, feeling that the first top-up reward hadn't let him down. Charles then shifted his focus to the rewards for VIP level upgrades. Ding! Congratulations, recharge successful. Charles Doyle promoted to VIP 4. Reward, 16,000 copper coins, 100 reputation, 2 secret technique scrolls, and 1 ninja recruitment scroll. Ding! Congratulations, recharge successful. Charles Doyle promoted to VIP 5. Reward, 18,000 copper coins, 150 reputation, 3 secret technique scrolls, and 1 ninja recruitment scroll. Ding! VIP level 5, opening the ninja store privilege. You can buy 4 ninja fragments daily in the store. Receiving these 2 pieces of good news in succession, Charles was very satisfied, having obtained 5 secret technique scrolls and 2 ninja recruitment scrolls for free, which were of considerable value. Especially with the ninja store finally allowing the purchase of ninja fragments, Charles was overjoyed. Finally, besides ninja recruitment, there was a place to obtain ninja fragments. Without hesitation, Charles immediately clicked on the item store in the shop interface. Besides the item store, there was finally an additional section for ninjas. Opening the ninja page, Charles saw 4 ninja avatars: Rock Lee Fragment, Kushina Fragment, Naruto Fragment, and Yi Kurane Fragment. Rock Lee Fragment, 80 gold coins. Kushina Fragment, 160 gold coins. Naruto Fragment, 80 gold coins. Yi Kurane Fragment, 180 gold coins. Under each avatar, it showed the daily limit purchase, 0/4, along with a sentence in the lower left corner stating that it automatically refreshes at midnight daily. However, after careful examination, Charles didn't find the option for self-selection, which somewhat disappointed him. However, he speculated that his VIP level might not be high enough, and with a higher VIP level, he should be able to activate this privilege. By then, he could choose for himself, and as long as he had gold coins, acquiring S rank, A rank, or B rank ninjas would be much easier.
Thanks for listening.